Happy Easter Monday. It's a holiday for a lot of people. For a lot of people, it's not. For us, we're just going to watch some more Canadian soap operas, some federal politics, try to keep it light. Yesterday's day was pretty heavy just on my end, I guess, and whatever. Today we're going to do our best and keep everything light. So hopefully we're going to be sounding a little bit crisper, maybe just a little bit crisper, and maybe we've got a pretty fun show lined up. Hope everybody's doing well. I'll get around to saying hello to everybody here in a second, but we're going to jump in with Danielle Smith because people like watching her. Then we're doing Poilievre and Trudeau scandals. We've got a lot of things lined up. It's going to be a fun couple of hours to watch Canadian federal politics in a lighter way than we normally do. Trying to bring the fun back to this stuff, guys. It is bad times. I know. We all feel that. And it's a bad April Fool's Day joke that's being played on us today. We're going to persevere. We'll get an election. We'll turn things around. Those are my hopes. Anyhow, it's just really funny. I watched a video of myself yesterday from like the very first time I did a broadcast with about politics, and my eyes have been, anyways, a little bit of innocence lost, but we're going to get some more of that joie de vivre back. Anyway, we're jumping in. Here's Danielle Smith. Let's get going.
At an all-time high, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is now accusing Conservative premiers who oppose the measure of misleading Canadians.
But for ideological reasons or reasons of pure partisanship, Conservative politicians across this country are not telling the truth to Canadians. And that's why I called them out. And I'm going to continue to call them out and remind them that if they really don't like our approach to pricing pollution, they can develop their own approach.
The Prime Minister also released his own public letter to those premiers and challenged them to come up with a better climate action plan. The federal backstop, according to the government, aims to incentivize Canadians to reduce their own emissions while also providing quarterly rebates called the Canada Carbon Rebate. But for weeks, 8 premiers, including Liberal, Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey, have been publicly urging the feds to pause the increase as Canadians face a cost of living crisis. Where do things go from here? Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is with us now. Hi, Premier. Good to see you as always. Thanks for making the time.
You bet. Hi, Vashi.
I know you appeared before committee this week to voice your opposition to that upcoming hike in the carbon tax. You argued it was immoral to levy the tax when Albertans are struggling with a cost of living crisis. Yet, the provincial fuel tax is going up on the same day by 4 cents. How can you ask the federal government to provide relief to Albertans when you're not willing to?
Well, part of it is that we've given $7 billion of relief over the past 2 years to try to compensate for what we've been seeing at the federal level. And we have a program that's in place so that as soon as oil prices get high again, if they go over $90, then the gas tax would come completely off. When it's below $80, it comes back on. And so we're watching prices very closely. I told the committee I'd be more than happy if the federal government did the same thing, because with their carbon tax, their fuel tax, and the GST, they charge 35 cents on every tank of gas. And if they took the same approach that they would eliminate it when gas prices got too high, then we probably wouldn't have any complaint.
What I gather from that, though, is that you see there to be a purpose in the fuel tax you've applied, insofar as that money goes to pay for roads. From what the federal government says, they too see a purpose in levying the carbon tax, not to be punitive, but to affect behavior over the long term in order to reach this country's emissions targets. Isn't that valid as well?
What's up? Kirk,
well,
Lori,
I guess I need to see some evidence of that.
Sheila,
you had the Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, said that he wasn't anticipating the carbon tax to make a difference until 2060. And so when you think about what behaviors are you trying to incent, well, part of it is you're trying to get people to buy zero emissions vehicles, which cost $60,000. You're trying to get them to change out their home heating systems, which can cost $10,000 to $20,000. And you're trying to get them to make really expensive changes to renovate their homes. And I just don't know that giving people a couple $100 every quarter is going to incentivize that. There's other ways to be able to get those kind of changes. But this looks like just a shell game. It's a matter of taking money away, giving some of it back, and pretending you're doing something about the environment. I think most people see through it.
I do understand raising the question because they hadn't yet provided a lot of evidence around how effective is this particular measure. But there is recently some outside evidence through the Canadian Climate Institute that says the consumer portion of the carbon tax by 2030 will be worth a reduction in emissions of about 8 to 9% of the total. That's not nothing. What do you propose to displace that?
Well, I can tell you what we are seeing displace that. There are some programs the federal government has and has partnered with us that do seem to be working. For instance, the carbon capture utilization and storage tax credit. We've announced ours. We think the federal government will be putting some structure around those very soon. That has resulted in Pathways, which is our bitumen producers, talking about creating a $16.5 billion carbon capture trunk line. We have partnered with the Strategic Investment Fund, which is under the portfolio of Francois Philippe Champagne, on Dow Chemicals net zero petrochemical plant, Air Products net zero hydrogen, Heidelberg's net zero cement, Interpipeline on their ammonia project. Those are projects that are going to be net zero immediately after they're done. And I don't think that factors into anyone's modeling. But those are the kind of things that we need to do if we're going to make effective reductions in major industrial emissions.
The issue, though, is that those don't come for free for taxpayers. You're proposing over the next decade, for example, to spend between $3.2 and $5.3 billion of taxpayer money to fuel the development of carbon capture, for example, in your province. That's not nothing either. That costs taxpayers as well.
Well, I would say that there's a lot of industry making money, and it allows them to keep more of what they earn to be able to invest in these emissions reductions. That's, I think, a sensible way of doing it. When we've looked at our ACIP program, that's our program for petrochemical incentives, we've determined that has a payoff at about 10 years with the extra taxes that those companies will end up paying. So those are the kind of approaches that we think are going to make sense, as opposed to putting an immediate burden on people who can least afford to pay it, those who are seniors, those who are low income. That's where we believe that the focus should be on the industrial emissions reduction, pricing that out, and making sure that we're holding those companies to account. But I think it's just frustrating for people to continue to see a tax when the alternatives just simply aren't available to them.
Is it, though, accurate to say that the industrial side of things will be more effective or less costly, I should say, for Albertans or for Canadians writ large? Again, those come with a very specific cost. It's just not as naked as the carbon tax. And when you talk about particularly impacting lower income and older Albertans or again, writ large Canadians, I mean, all the calculations the Parliamentary Budget Officer have done show that in those income brackets, in fact, they are getting more money back than they're paying in.
Well, I would say the only way we're going to make significant emissions reduction is at the industrial level. Because if Albertans are going to have a different type of fuel, maybe it's hydrogen, you need to build up the infrastructure for that. You need to be able to create the hydrogen, transport it, change out your pipeline system.
But do you have evidence that the changes you're going to make, for example, more specifically, because you're talking more broadly, more specifically around carbon capture, are going to do what you said? Are you sure you're going to get value for taxpayer money there?
Well, look, we invested $1 billion 10 years ago to develop this Shell Quest project, and already it has captured 11.5 megatons of emissions. I know that over in Saskatchewan, they have a similar type of emissions reduction project, capture project, that has captured 40 megatons of emissions. We can align to a target of 2050. Not only do I think we can achieve that, I think because I know our industry so well, they'll strive to do it even faster.
Hey, Patty,
but
if
you put an arbitrary limit in place that reduces production, reduces your revenues, you're going to impair the ability to invest in those kinds of projects. And I think that's self-defeating.
Do you have evidence to support the idea or the characterization you're using that it's arbitrary? Because the federal government is aligning its targets with much of the rest of the world that has signed on to agreements, for example, through the UN about what the overall targets are by 2030, by 2035, and by 2050. And what they talk about is often, reaching those targets in order to stop the warming that's happening. That is increasing the frequency with which we are seeing the impacts of climate change. So fires, let's say, man-made in many instances, but taking up a wider swath of land that Albertans will be very familiar with and happening more frequently. In your last budget, expenses are up $2.1 billion from the previous year, largely due to $2.9 billion earmarked to deal with droughts, wildfires, and floods. There is a cost of inaction around climate change as well, and I think the federal government would argue that means that their their targets are not arbitrary.
Well, I guess I would say is paying a carbon tax at the pump going to stop the fires in our province? And the answer is no. What stops the fires is, number one, education, because 60% of them are human caused. Number two, building fire breaks so that we can protect communities. Number three, investing in water bomb equipment like de Havilland so that we can fight fires. Number four, sharing resources with the rest of the country through the Canadian Forest Fire Association. So I think the cause and effect are very different. You have to be able to deal with crises as they happen. So I'm watching to see, with some evidence, that the carbon tax is changing behavior. I just haven't seen it yet.
But the point is for it to do so over a long period of time, not immediately, right? That's the point of incentivizing the behaviors. And to separate the idea that reducing emissions does mitigate the impact of climate change from fighting fires. Of course, you have to do adaptation, as we were discussing, but that becomes more expensive if they happen more frequently. And though they are human caused, the frequency and the scope of them are a direct impact of climate change.
We will always have fires. We will always have floods. We will always have ice storms. And the job of government is to make sure that we mitigate, that we are prepared for when they happen, and that we have the resources available to do it. I can't, you have to make sure that you're budgeting for both of those things. And so that's why we have a plan to be carbon neutral by 2050. But I just don't think that we punish people in the meantime. Let's build out the hydrogen infrastructure, build out the electrical infrastructure, make sure that we've got enough vehicles available for people to buy. And then we can start seeing the consumers change their behavior. But in the meantime, it really is just an extra tax.
And I do really, sorry, I know your time is limited, I just have a second, but I do understand the lack of alternatives, certainly, and those are pertinent questions for the federal government. But it sounds to me like you're delineating between fires happening and floods happening and mitigating the impacts of climate change. Do you not see them as the same thing?
Well, I guess what I don't see is that carbon tax is having an immediate impact on my pressing need each year to prepare for fires. Every year I'm going to need to prepare for fires. We've got an aging forest infrastructure. Our trees end up dying at about 100 years old. So we've got an aging forest infrastructure. We had the El Nino effect this year. We had a devastating fire season last year. It still means that I've got to pay for that. I can't just hope that a carbon tax is going to stop fires from burning in my province. We've got to be able to do both. And we have to be able to do both on a timescale that makes sense. So I'm going to be planning for fires this year. We hope that they're not devastating. And over the course of the next 25 years, we'll be reducing emissions by finding different alternatives, using innovation, and making sure that we get to carbon neutral by 2050. But I just don't think when we're in the middle of this affordability crisis, that increasing the cost of everything for individuals when they can't avoid those costs, I just don't think that's fair. I don't think it's right.
Premier, I'll leave it on that note. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
After a quick break, federal budget.
All right. Well, we're back to this. So what do we have lined up next? This is some pieces with Pierre Poilievre. Well, it's actually just about how many Trudeau scandals there have been. So over the next half hour, we're going to review all of the Trudeau scandals. They're pretty fun videos. Again, we've got this, the channel that we picked this up from, they were happy to share this with us. We're just going to take a look at this because Trudeau has been involved in a lot of scandals, guys. So here we go with that.
His own brother was the one that negotiated and signed the deal to receive the money. Will the Prime Minister accept to call his brother to a parliamentary committee to answer questions about this?
ArriveCan was created for the cost of $54 million. Experts have said that this app could have been created with simply $200,000 over a week.
Since Justin Trudeau took office in 2015, his government has faced several controversies that have shaken the Canadian political landscape. Elbowgate incident. In 2016, Trudeau was involved in a physical altercation on the floor of the House of Commons with opposition MPs during a debate over a controversial assisted dying bill.
That the Liberals had cut off debate. Now watch this. The man in the front is the Conservative whip. He can't get by a group of NDP MPs, including leader Tom Mulcair. On the left, the Prime Minister comes striding over to intervene. He has words with Mulcair. At the same time, he clearly also makes contact with MP Ruth Ellen Brosseau. Trudeau walks away.
The Norman affair. Vice Admiral Mark Norman was charged with breach of trust for allegedly leaking government secrets, but the case was ultimately dropped. It raised questions about political interference in the judicial system.
It's just to get to court, get this dealt with as quickly as possible, and get back to serving the people of Canada.
The ship is there, the workers are there, it's an important project, and it has to move forward as planned.
The feds backtracked and quickly approved the contract, but furious over the leak, they ordered the RCMP to investigate. Enter Vice Admiral Mark Norman, the military's second in command. The RCMP alleged that for over a year, he leaked cabinet secrets to unauthorized parties, including Davy, to help the shipyard secure the contract. In January 2017, Norman was suspended from his job. And more than a year later, he was charged with 1 count of breach of trust.
This has been a really difficult time.
Jeremy?
It's going to continue to be a real
Jimmy,
challenge.
how are you?
Norman vehemently denies any wrongdoing, but the case has led to many questions. Why did the Conservatives change the rules around procurement? And why were the Liberals hesitant to let Davy have the contract? Those questions all set the stage for a high-stakes political drama.
SNC-Lavalin scandal. One major scandal involved the SNC-Lavalin affair, where Trudeau was accused of pressuring his former Attorney General to intervene in a criminal case against a Quebec-based engineering firm.
Legal fight finally over. SNC's construction division pleaded guilty to fraud. It now admits it paid millions to Saadi Gaddafi, the son of former Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi, to try to win contracts. Now, the company will pay a $280 million penalty and spend 3 years under probation. The Crown insists it's not a slap on the wrist.
I challenge everyone to find a fine that is higher than that for a criminal offense by a company.
Charges of corruption against the main company were withdrawn, so SNC-Lavalin won't be barred from bidding on public contracts, which had been its worst-case scenario.
We Charity scandal. Another significant controversy was the We Charity scandal, in which the government was criticized for its close ties to the charity and alleged conflicts of interest in awarding it a lucrative contract for a youth volunteer program.
I made a mistake in not recusing myself immediately from the discussions, given our family's history. And I'm sincerely sorry about not having done that.
We know that Justin Trudeau is only sorry when he gets caught, and that's what the apology was all about today.
The blackface incident. Furthermore, Trudeau's past incidents of wearing blackface and brownface were highly condemned, leading to accusations of racial insensitivity and a breach of trust.
I attended an end-of-year gala where the theme was Arabian Nights, and I dressed up in an Aladdin costume and put makeup on. I shouldn't have done that. I should have known better, but I didn't, and I'm really sorry. I think there are people who've made mistakes in this life, and you make decisions based on what they actually do, what they did, and on a case-by-case basis. I think I
shrugging it off.
Deeply regret that I did that. I should have known better.
Aga Khan controversy. Additionally, there was the Aga Khan controversy, where Trudeau was found to have violated federal ethics laws by accepting a family vacation on the private island of the Aga Khan, a billionaire philanthropist and spiritual leader.
Something.
Transparency rules exist for a reason. Not only did the Prime Minister accept an illegal trip to a private island, he went there and received additional gifts from someone who is actively lobbying the government. Those are the facts. So will the Prime Minister come clean and tell Canadians, did he return those illegal and unacceptable gifts before he could be lobbied again?
Lobbying registry, that they were set up to lobby the government. How could it not have occurred to you that that might not have been okay?
The fact is, we work, sorry, let me just try to reorder the thoughts. We worked with the lobby conflict of interest commissioner on a regular basis on a broad range of issues when the issues come up. On this issue of a family vacation with a personal friend, it wasn't considered that there would be an issue there.
Cash for Access fundraisers. Trudeau was criticized for attending high-priced fundraisers where wealthy donors paid for access to him and his cabinet, potentially influencing government policies.
I know that the Liberals would like to try to make it seem like this wasn't a big deal, that this was potentially a lack of judgment or a lapse in judgment, but it's important that Canadians can have confidence in their institutions and in their politicians and people who have great power in this country. The Prime Minister and the Finance Minister being the two most powerful politicians in our system, and that in order to be trusted with that power, they have to be open and transparent and accountable. So I think it is a serious lapse in judgment for the Prime Minister not to realize that there was a conflict in the first place. To me, is a tremendous lack of judgment. I accept him at his word today, but it does seem like this Prime Minister was, made the decision that it was easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission.
Mr. Speaker, the saga of the sale of the BC retirement homes to mysterious Chinese investors is getting murkier. We know the Prime Minister was approached at a Cash for Access fundraiser regarding this deal. Yesterday, the Innovation Minister had to stand in this House and apologize for misleading Canadians regarding the true ownership, and 20 operating licenses were issued in 1 week. Clearly, the fix was in. One of the residents phoned me here, and she said she's very worried about this particular issue and how it will affect vulnerable seniors. So I will ask the Minister again, will he finally show some respect and tell these seniors who owns their home?
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Party is up to its old tricks again. Today we have bribery charges against one of Kathleen Wynne's top advisors and also against an Ontario Liberal bagman who once held a fundraiser for our Prime Minister. And now we have our Liberal Prime Minister and his cabinet refusing to acknowledge their own ethical violations with the Cash for Access scheme. Mr. Speaker, this is a lesson for the Prime Minister. He can take action immediately and enforce his own ethical standards, or he can end up like Kathleen Wynne. What's he going to do?
Ethics violations. Trudeau has been repeatedly found to have violated federal ethics laws, including his acceptance of gifts, his involvement in the We Charity scandal, and his failure to recuse himself from discussions that could financially benefit his family. These scandals have contributed to an erosion of public trust and have raised concerns about the ethical standards and transparency of the Trudeau government.
Well, it's definitely a family business for this Prime Minister, whether it was the We Charity paying his brother and mother money, the Prime Minister claiming to know nothing about it as he handed $500 million over to that organization, or the Trudeau Foundation, which got $140,000 from the dictatorship in Beijing for the specific purpose of influencing his decisions in politics. But now we know that his own brother was the one that negotiated and signed the deal to receive the money. Will the Prime Minister accept to call his brother to a parliamentary committee to answer questions about this?
Ruined international relations with foreign countries. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's incompetence has diminished Canada on the international stage. Canada is not part of many international groups which it is used to be. Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre called him incompetent and unprofessional in one of the interviews as Trudeau faced criticism for his handling of international relations with countries like India and China. Trudeau's visit to India in 2018 was marked by a series of missteps, including his attire choices and a perceived lack of diplomatic finesse, which strained relations between the two nations.
Good to see you, man.
Later in his visit to G20 meeting held in India in September 2023, he falsely accused India publicly over K terrorists' death without any proof and ruined the strategic relation even further.
The volume's not bad. That's just the way their video, they decided to produce it. I would have put music in here or something, but they carried it over.
Additionally, his government's stance on human rights issues and the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou caused tensions with China.
Sabrina, did you violate the sanctions? Ms. Meng, what's your reaction to being granted bail today? Meng, what's your reaction to being granted bail today?
Ms. Meng was given a hearing immediately. It was the full, open, transparent nature of our judicial system. She was granted bail. She is now in her own home in Vancouver.
Later, there was another issue with Chinese interference in Canada's government also caused a lot of frustration among Canadians.
Incredibly important that we continue to protect Canadians from any and all types of interference. And one of the things we're focused on in this inquiry is recognizing, yes, China and Russia are responsible for interference, but other countries engage in it as well. And this commission will engage in looking at the broad suite of interference in Canada.
While it's essential to acknowledge that international relations are multifaceted, Trudeau's approach in these instances was perceived as inadequate, which contributed to strained ties with India and China, and raised concerns about Canada's diplomatic effectiveness on the global stage.
The $54 million ArriveCan app scandal sent shockwaves through the Canadian political landscape, unraveling a narrative of financial mismanagement and alleged corruption. The controversy, which emerged in the fall of 2023, exposed a series of irregularities surrounding the development and implementation of the widely touted mobile application intended to facilitate border crossing procedures.
Imagine a Lifetime movie. Imagine a Lifetime movie that includes the elements of identity theft, forged resumes, contractual theft, fraudulent contracting, and collusion. Well, Madam Speaker, you don't have to imagine this Lifetime movie because it actually exists. It is the ordeal behind ArriveCan. ArriveCan was created for the cost of $54 million. Experts have said that this app could have been created with simply $200,000 over a weekend, but instead $54 million, Madam Speaker, was spent on this app. And of that $54 million, $11.2 million, Madam Speaker, went to a company called GC Strategies, and $4.3 million, Madam Speaker, went to two companies called Caratix and Dalian. And I'll add that these companies actually have received $80.3 million from the federal government over a significant period of time. So it's very concerning that these companies would receive these large amounts of funding for this $54 million.
Despite these challenges, the Trudeau government has continued to govern with the support of NDP, but these scandals have left a lasting impact on the public's perception of the administration. His approval rating has nosedived drastically, and Canadian public is anxiously waiting for the next election in October 2025. Trudeau government scandals is really a troubled legacy that will go down in Canadian history.
The thousands of hard-working, law-abiding, and peaceful truckers who quite frankly have kept all of you alive the last 2 years.
The Trudeau government, entrusted with the well-being and rights of Canadians, has repeatedly failed its people. From heavy-handed responses to peaceful protests to the infringement on personal freedoms, their actions have left a trail of emotional distress and disillusionment among the populace. Resignation mid-semester at West Point Grey Academy. Rumors of an explosive scandal were circulating at the top levels of Canada's media establishment back in 2019. Ottawa's longest-tenured political observers had been expecting a career-ending exposé in the Globe and Mail edition, but that story never came. Because, my dear listeners, Trudeau was in private talks with the principal source of that piece to suppress explosive allegations posed at him. It was hush-hush, and rumor has it that the student was offered monetary compensation in exchange for non-disclosure agreement, or in other terms, a gag order. Allegations of this nature, if true, would inevitably cast doubt on Trudeau's dedication to his academic commitments and his capacity to effectively balance his responsibilities as both a teacher and a prominent political figure. The uncertainty surrounding his alleged resignation would likely fuel intense public scrutiny and potentially impact his credibility within both the educational and political communities. Rose Knight Affair. In the alleged incident involving Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and a journalist named Rose Knight, the shocking revelation of inappropriate behavior sent ripples through the political landscape. The accusations of groping, if true, would mark a significant breach of trust and respect, especially given Trudeau's vocal advocacy for women's rights and gender equality. The subsequent apology from the Prime Minister may have provided some measure of accountability, but it could not erase the impact of the incident on the public's perception of his character and integrity. This event served as a stark reminder of the importance of upholding professional conduct and respect within all spheres of society, particularly within the realm of political leadership. Nova Scotia mass shooting. The Nova Scotia mass shooting, which occurred in April 2020, stands as one of Canada's deadliest incidents of its kind. The gunman, identified as Gabriel Wortman, carried out a 13-hour killing spree, resulting in the deaths of 22 individuals and leaving a trail of devastation in rural communities. The incident raised significant questions about the response of law enforcement authorities, as there were concerns about the timeliness and effectiveness of the emergency alert system and the coordination of the police response. Wortman, who had no previous criminal record, was described as a successful denturist, and the motives behind his actions remained unclear. The tragedy highlighted critical gaps in Canada's gun control policies and the need for improved emergency response protocols to prevent such atrocities from occurring in the future. Gun control. Gun control has been a topic of ongoing debate in Canada, with efforts to regulate firearms dating back to the late 19th century. The current framework was significantly influenced by the 1989 École Polytechnique massacre in Montreal, where a gunman killed 14 women, leading to the introduction of stricter gun laws. The Firearms Act of 1995 and subsequent amendments aim to enhance public safety by implementing rigorous licensing and registration requirements for gun owners, as well as imposing restrictions on certain types of firearms. In May 2020, the government announced a ban on over 1,500 models and variants of assault-style firearms, including the AR-15 rifle, which is a semi-automatic firearm. Critics argue that the regulations impose unnecessary burdens on law-abiding citizens and do little to deter criminal activity. There remains a contentious divide between the society, especially for those emphasizing the importance of safeguarding the rights of responsible gun owners, for example farmers and hunters. The data collected so far indicates that the violence has been caused by people outside of these parameters, so the government ban does not make any sense and there may be a different agenda behind the gun ban. Police and government administration issues. There were multiple instances across different provinces where issues related to workplace harassment, misconduct, or corruption within the police and government administrations have led to the resignation of senior officers, even chiefs. $8 million barn. In the scenario surrounding the controversial $8 million barn purchase by the Trudeau government, public scrutiny and debate were ignited over the perceived extravagance and allocation of taxpayer funds. Questions emerged regarding the necessity and transparency of such an expensive acquisition, prompting concerns about the government's fiscal responsibility and prioritization of public spending. Allegations of mismanagement and misuse of taxpayer money would likely have intensified, further fueling public distrust and calls for greater accountability and transparency within the government's financial decisions. Financial burdens on Canada. A series of bad decisions have put Canada into this crisis today. Giving $12 million to Loblaws to install new fridges to $13 billion grant to Volkswagen to open a factory in Ontario. Normally, government gives tax breaks, grants to businesses, but these do not even come close to anything. Volkswagen's $13 billion is biggest corporate welfare payout in modern Canadian history. Bombardier's $4 billion, which was collected over 50 years, doesn't even come close. Ultimately, the Trudeau government has left Canadians burdened with a staggering debt of $662 billion, continuously escalating with each passing year. This figure stands in stark contrast to the $630 billion accumulated by all previous prime ministers combined since 1867, signifying an unprecedented level of financial strain. The implications of this mounting debt appear insurmountable, potentially exerting long-term repercussions for the nation's financial stability and prosperity in the coming decades. Truckers' protest. The recent truckers' protest in Canada became a symbol of public discontent with the government's policies. When Canadian truckers took to the streets in peaceful protest, they sought to be heard, to voice their concerns. Instead, the Trudeau government responded with an iron fist, invoking emergency powers that trampled the very essence of democratic dissent. The betrayal of trust, the violation of the basic right to protest, shattered the hopes of those who believed in the government's commitment to democratic values.
The Prime Minister's own Deputy Prime Minister, CHYSTIA FREELAND, said that COVID was a political opportunity. And his former Finance Minister, Bill Borneau, says that the Prime Minister used vaccines as a wedge issue to divide people. And thus, a lot of people were so helpless and so desperate they ended up participating in a protest in Ottawa. This was an emergency that Justin Trudeau created by attacking his own population, by driving up their cost of living, by making it impossible for people to pay their bills and live their lives in peace. He caused the emergency that unfolded. And then when he caused it, he piled on, he poured more gasoline on the fire with nasty insults, jabbing his finger in the faces of his own citizens, something that even today's report acknowledged contributed to the length and the intensity of the protest.
Justice Rouleau said that he did not accept the organizers' descriptions of the protest as lawful, calm, peaceful, or something resembling a celebration. He wrote that the bigger picture reveals the situation in Ottawa was unsafe and chaotic. Justice Rouleau also found that the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act was justified. Do you accept Justice Rouleau's findings, and do you regret endorsing the Freedom Convoy?
Well, first of all, your question was typical of CBC, bias again. You forgot to mention what the report said, which is more of an effort should have been made by government leaders at all levels during the protest to acknowledge that the majority of protesters were exercising their fundamental democratic rights. What I said before, during, and after the protest was that I condemn anyone who behaves badly, breaks laws, or blockades critical infrastructure, while standing on the side of the hardworking people who have suffered so much under 8 years of Justin Trudeau and were desperately trying to have their voices heard against an insulting and divisive Prime Minister. And the only reason that we had this emergency is because Justin Trudeau wanted it to happen, because he wanted to distract and divide Canadians from the pain and suffering that he has caused by driving up their cost of living, making it impossible for our youth to own homes, by taxing our working class, and by imposing unnecessary and unscientific rules that brought an end to the livelihoods of countless heroes we needed for our economy. Thank you.
COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Coercion over compassion in health mandates. The forced COVID-19 vaccine mandate stands as a stark reminder of the government's coercion over compassion, control over care. Canadians seeking autonomy over their healthcare decisions have been met with mandates that ignore their legitimate concerns and fears. The emotional distress of those grappling with the violation of their bodily autonomy, the fear of coercion overshadowing their medical choices, speaks volumes about the erosion of trust in the government's duty to safeguard the well-being of its citizens. The implementation of such mandates should be backed by clear, science-based information rather than the lies which are being exposed afterwards. Serious efforts should have been made to address concerns and hesitations as well as individuals' rights to choose their own health mandates without taking their entire freedom. A more effective public awareness campaign and better coordination
Randy,
with
I love
provinces
this
and
channel
territories could have made the vaccine mandate
feel
more
that.
acceptable to the public.
The
I'm learning
community
and
that faced
showing
the most
while I
restrictions
learn.
on their
That's
freedoms
the idea.
in the
That's
last
it.
year were those who made a choice not to be
way we get
vaccinated.
there.
I don't think I've ever experienced a situation in my lifetime where a person was fired from their job or not allowed to watch their kids play hockey or not allowed to go visit a loved one in long-term care or hospital or not allowed to go get on a plane to either go across the country to see family or even travel across the border. So they have been the most discriminated against group that I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. That's a pretty extreme level of discrimination that we have seen. I don't take away any of the discrimination that I've seen in those other groups that you mentioned, but this has been an extraordinary time in the last year in particular. And I want people to know that I find that unacceptable, that we are not going to create a segregated society on the basis of a medical choice.
Imposing beliefs on innocent minds, parents protest. Another contentious issue was the protests by parents concerned about the implementation of LGBTQ inclusive curriculum in schools. The government's mandate to force LGBTQ curriculum without genuine consultation with parents and communities tore at the very fabric of family values and individual rights. Mothers and fathers, deeply invested in their children's education, were left helpless as their voices were silenced by a government that chose to impose its beliefs rather than foster understanding and cooperation. The emotional toll on these families, who felt betrayed and unheard, was immeasurable.
Police who are telling us about so much violence that's happening out in front of the state.
Silence! No more silence! No more silence! No more silence! No more silence! Leave the kids alone! Leave the kids alone! Leave the kids alone!
Silencing voices of reason. In a move that reeks of authoritarianism, the Trudeau government's restrictions on free speech have silenced the voices of reason and dissent. Initiatives to regulate online content and restrict certain forms of expression have raised fears about the government's encroachment on individuals' right to express their opinions freely. The Trudeau government's failure to strike a balance between safeguarding against hate speech and preserving the principles of free speech has raised questions about its commitment to upholding democratic principles. Apart from that, exist some instances where individuals daring to express opinions contrary to the government's narrative have been targeted and censored, their thoughts and beliefs trampled upon in the name of political expediency. The emotional anguish of those whose voices have been suppressed and marginalized is a testament to the erosion of trust and freedom in the country.
Yes or no question, Mr. Chair. Prime Minister, you twice were found guilty of breaking the Ethics Act. After those two convictions, did you decide to read the act?
So we're jumping right into just a little more of Pierre Poilievre nailing Trudeau. This is only a short bit. I'm sure that you've all seen it before, but it's still kind of fun to see Trudeau with his back against the wall. So that's what we're watching.
You got 14 seconds, Prime Minister.
Yes, I have read the act a number of times.
Are you aware of Section 21?
Yes, since I've read the act, I'm aware of Section 21.
What does it say?
I can pull it up for you, but if you have it in front of you, you'll remind me.
Well, it says a public office holder, of which you are one, shall recuse himself or herself from any discussion, decision, debate, or vote in any matter in which, in respect of which he or she would be in a conflict of interest. Now, what you've admitted today is not just that you were in a conflict of interest, but that you consciously recognized in your May cabinet meeting that such a conflict might exist. That it didn't just slide by your desk, that you were consciously aware that there was an inappropriate link to your family that would put you in a conflict. Why did you, at that moment, not call the ethics commissioner and recuse yourself?
That is simply not true, Mr. Poilievre. The issue of advancing issues for one's own family. And by the way, the ethics commissioner is looking into this right now, and I fully trust his judgment on determining it. But at the same time, my concern around recusing myself was a question around perceptions, because I knew full well that this Canada Summer Students Grant Program was not going to directly benefit my mother or my brother.
Your 16 seconds are up. Your 16 seconds are up. I'm going to ask you again, because nobody believes you when you say you don't know how much money your family has got from the We Group. So you've had a month to look into that. You knew you were going to testify here. Again, how much money total have your brother, mother, and spouse received from this organization? How much?
That information has been publicly shared, but I will highlight.
Well, then tell me what it is.
My mother
How much?
Has
There's no number that he's going to give, man.
The dollar figure, Prime Minister.
In various ways, and is
How much
of the work that she's done, and I'm proud of her.
How
as well.
much? I'm looking for a dollar figure.
We can get that number for you if you like. It's been out in the media.
It's been in the media, but you don't know it?
I don't have it in front of me. And quite
You don't
frankly,
know how much your family has received from this organization, which you tried to give $500 million, really?
Can I answer, Mr. Poilievre?
I'm waiting. You haven't done an answer so far. Let's make this the first one.
My mother has worked as an advocate.
The dollar figure, Prime Minister.
Speaker for
How much?
many good organizations across the country.
Mr.
over many,
Prime
many
Minister,
years.
you
And
are
she is
you
proud
you
that
are
she
being
doesn't
asked
have to
a
rely
direct
on a
question
husband
at a
or a
parliamentary
son to
committee.
support her, because she does her own work, and I'm proud
of order.
the work
Point
that
of
she does.
point of order.
But I do not feel that it is
Answer
my
the question.
responsibility to peer into the work my mother is doing, because I have
Point of order to
confidence in the work
suspend.
that she's doing.
Point of order to
I've
suspend,
come
please.
to learn that the chairperson's power has gone out and is no longer part of this meeting. May I propose that we
It's okay.
suspend
We
for
can
a few
keep
minutes for
Prime
Wayne
Minister and I
to,
can continue talking.
No.
I suspected that might be a problem. It's very convenient timing for the lights to go out.
Look, I got a message to the effect that his power has gone out. I have no reason to distrust him.
I hope you don't pull the fire alarm now.
Yeah, well, look, there's no intent in my own private home here in the middle of a pandemic. I don't have a fire alarm. I propose
the general process is that the vice chair assumes the chairing of the meeting. So we'll continue.
And that would be me. So we'll continue the meeting. And I now give the floor to the member for Carleton. Mr. Prime Minister, you have. I'm going to ask you one last time. How much did your family get from this organization? How much?
Have you read the Conflict of Interest Act, Mr.
Yes,
Poilievre?
I have.
How does it define family?
I'm asking you.
How does it define
I'm asking
family?
you how much your family got.
The Conflict of Interest Act defines family as spouse and direct dependents.
Point of
So
order.
you're not going to answer that question.
Point of
order.
So you're not going to answer the question then. So you're not going to answer the question about how much your family received. Okay, you're right.
Hold it, gentlemen.
Hang in there, Kirk. It gets a little easier. We've got some letters stuff to watch soon. It has been a long list of lies that were, now the Liberals are panicking.
Come on,
In my opinion, lightning rod, they're
I had
panicking,
control
but
for you while you were gone.
it's just the way I see it.
Pierre, it wouldn't be the first time you tried to put my lights out, and that's exactly what happened. Pierre, we got a thunderstorm here. You're well into your 5 minutes, but go with one last question.
Mr. Trudeau, I'm going to conclude by asking you, you claim that you have no knowledge of the amount that has been paid in expenses to your spouse. You correctly pointed out that the Act defines family as including a spouse. Therefore, you know you're under investigation regarding the Act. I'm going to ask you again, how much in total, and I'm looking for a dollar figure here, sir, how much did your spouse receive in reimbursed expenses or other benefits from this organization? How much?
Your original question, Mr. Poilievre, was how much was my immediate family?
I asked you a different question now. How much?
Mr. Poilievre, the Prime Minister has the floor.
My wife has never been paid since I was Prime Minister.
Reimbursed for expenses.
Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Poilievre, could we please have order? We'll allow the Prime Minister to answer the question, and then we'll move on to Ms. Zerowitz. Sorry, Julie. Mr. Prime Minister, you have about 30 seconds here.
The Ethics Commissioner has fully cleared my wife to continue her advocacy and her work with We Charity and other organizations.
How much?
In the kind of work that she's been doing all her life.
Just the dollar
figure. She's doing it unpaid for We. She is not being paid by We for her advocacy or for her podcasts. They are simply reimbursing her for expenses.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
And where
This
is
is
the
just
money
another
going?
one. This is another one.
From this carbon tax?
More.
Well, we found out today. Secret
The audio
recordings
is bad on this
from a top bureaucrat in the Liberal government admit that a green fund was giving out, quote, free money. Get this. I'm going to quote from the recording. It was free money, he said, before making an analogy with a controversy that affected Jean Chrétien's Liberal government in the 2000s. That is almost sponsorship scandal level giveaway. Wow. So when they said green fund, what they meant is putting green in the pockets of well-connected Liberals. $1 billion fund. $1 billion fund. While Canadians cannot afford to eat, heat, and house themselves, Trudeau wants to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre in order to hand out more gifts and more giveaways to wealthy, connected Liberal insiders.
Hi there, and welcome to the video. I'm your host, John Iveson. This week I'm joined by Shachi Curl, who is the president of pollster Angus Reid Institute, to get her take on the federal political landscape. Shachi, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for coming on.
Hey, thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
So I'd like to take a deep dive into the poll that you brought out last Thursday. We're recording this on Monday. Just to give viewers a sense of it, in case they haven't seen it, it had the Conservatives, the horse race numbers, Conservatives on 40% support, the Liberals on 23%, the NDP on 21%, which second and third within the margin of error. If we take that first, I mean, the most noticeable thing to me is this continuing slide of the Liberals, who are now in danger of being overtaken by the NDP, although that's probably a misnomer because the NDP's numbers haven't been going anywhere. They've just been stable, and it's all been the trajectory of the Liberals. Do you think they've hit rock bottom yet?
Well, never say never. It certainly feels like there could be more room for them to slide. On the other hand, maybe they stabilize and maybe they start to climb back up a bit. It's entirely dependent on what is happening with the number one issue that continues to leave Canadians in a place of absolute despair, and that's the issue of affordability, cost of living. It's that. It is 99 problems all rolled up into one, and it all comes down to household economics. We often talk about the economy, but to Canadians, and I never use the word average Canadian because there ain't no such thing, but when you just talk to people in terms of what's going on at the household level, so forget growth rates, forget bank of interest rates, forget all of the macro stuff. What it comes down to is people are paying out more, bringing in less, and stressed as hell about it. And as long as that continues, and as long as Canadians do not find the relief that they're looking for, this is absolutely, and we've seen it through previous polling as well, the issue that is driving past Liberal voters away from the Trudeau Liberals and into the arms of Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives.
So, in the report, you noted that the Bank of Canada held steady on interest rates last week, but they did indicate that there are cuts coming. Probably not in April because the federal budget is a week later, but most likely in June or July. Do you think the die is cast, or would repeated cuts over a period of time? I mean, we're still probably 18 months from an election. Would enough cuts bring down that stress that you're talking about, do you think?
It would if people started to feel it. If people started feeling it, if you recently renegotiated your mortgage or you're on a variable rate, and all of a sudden for those on a variable rate, those hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month that they're paying out extra starts to ease, If you've renegotiated, but then you go back to your bank and say, look, rates have come way down or starting to come down. I want a better deal. I want some relief, and demanding some relief around that. Those are the things, and commensurately rent, right? Like it's all upward cost pressure. So as all of those things start to even out, if they start to even out, that can go a long way to easing some of the burden that Canadians are feeling. You made the point that it's 18 months possibly until the next election. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, constitutionally, they don't have to go until there's no writ that needs to be dropped, I think, until 2026, which is
right. They could go another year.
An awfully long time. But if they wanted to drag it for a good long time in order to, take political advantage, sounds kind of, I don't mean it in a snarky way, but avail themselves of a happier Canadian mood, let's put it that way, then absolutely we then find ourselves into a dual question equation, if you will. So right now, Canadians are vastly annoyed. They're blaming the Liberals over cost of living, and the answer in their minds at the moment is Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives. If that starts to ease, the two questions then become, has it eased enough? And what are the other factors that then drive the ballot or then drive the vote? So is it fatigue? And we know there is a tremendous amount of fatigue with Justin Trudeau and his Liberals. Or is it the resurgence or the primacy of other issues that have really been on simmer or on the back burner? Climate change, healthcare, other areas where the Liberals will probably feel like they can fight from a higher ground, if you will, or more a politically advantageous position on some of these issues than they feel the Conservatives can. So it's not only do I feel relief, but it's also okay, now I feel relief. Do I still like the cut of the Liberals' jib after after 3 terms going for a 4th?
Right. I mean, nothing in politics is immutable, and your poll points that out on at least 2 occasions. Respondents were asked who they thought would make best Prime Minister. Pierre Poilievre was chosen by 31%. None of the above was pretty close at 28%. Yeah. Justin Trudeau was chosen by just 1 in 6. But as you point out, just 4 months before he won in 2015, he was considered the 3rd best Prime Minister behind Stephen Harper and Thomas Mulcair. Similarly, his approval rating is just 1 in 3, with 2 in 3 disapproving. This is Justin Trudeau. But he was at a similar level in March 2019 at the height of the SNC Lavalin affair, and he recovered. So, he has the ability to come back.
He wasn't tremendously better going into that 2021 election either.
Right. So is this time different, I guess, is the question.
So, and really that's the question. Is a 4-peat possible? So a couple things to really point out, and you've done a good job of laying it out. But, the beauty of what we're able to do at the Institute, October of this year is going to mark our 10th year, our 10th birthday. So we've got all of this lovely tracking data, and we can tell you, where the Prime Minister was in 2015. He was nowhere. He literally sort of came out of the political hinterland to take advantage of a campaign situation. Similarly, went into 19 as the underdog, went into 21 as the underdog. And I've always said that the Liberal Party, are experts in wedgeology. They find that wedge issue and they find a way through to really sort of make voters who may be unhappy with them, tired of them, looking for an alternative to certainly to an extent in 19, especially in 2021, to come back and go, you know what, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for you because I don't like the Conservative alternative. And this is where we need to focus a little bit as well on what's going on with the Conservatives, because people tend to only pay attention to that vote top line. They only pay attention to that 40%, which, yes, if that was an election today, that would be a majority government. Absolutely, hands down, especially when you look at how those numbers are breaking in places like Quebec, places like British Columbia, where the Liberals have been able to depend on and maintain a healthy number of seats to keep things, respectable, so to speak. But what happens is that it's important to point out that while Pierre Poilievre's party is surging, he himself, in terms of his own personal popularity, is hitting a bit of an upper ceiling, and he is not getting the kind of swooning popularity numbers that a Brian Mulroney had in '84, or indeed a Justin Trudeau had at the end of that campaign in 2015.
I mean, there's a majority who have an unfavourable view, right? And that has been pretty consistent.
Correct, and he continues to have a challenge with negative favorability ratings, especially with women. And so, again, when it boils down to almost a single issue for swing voters, which is affordability, you solve that, it becomes a different election. It's a completely different election where the ballot issues have changed entirely. Now, on the other hand, tell me at times in history, and I would challenge anybody, like a four-peat is a really remarkable thing to pull off, especially under the same leader. It's not as though we've seen a change in leadership and the new leader comes in and they're fresh and all the rest of it. We've done polling in the past about how someone like a CHYSTIA Freeland or a Mark Carney polls. They do okay with past Liberals who say, oh, well, if there was a change in leader, I'd come back. But they're not picking up any swing votes. They're not picking up any Conservative votes. They're not siphoning any NDP votes. So I'm not sure that the math works even if they pull their own base back. They've just lost too much support over time. The other thing to point out on that best PM number is, yes, Poilievre is seen as best PM at that 31% mark, which is, higher than Trudeau, higher than Singh. But at the same time, if you look at where Andrew Scheer was, or Erin O'Toole was, or even Stephen Harper was on that best PM question, they were all hovering around the same 30% mark, and it wasn't necessarily a guarantee of success. So these data can be instructive, but they're not necessarily the whole ballgame.
Right. I mean, and Trudeau's approval rating remained about 1 in 3 Canadians, and essentially he won an election in 2021 with the support of 1 in 3 Canadians. And we know that he can, if not rely on the support of the NDP, he can probably, it would be a good bet that if the NDP came in third place, that they would prop up a Trudeau government, as they are doing now. I guess if Trudeau can put doubt in the minds of the jury about Poilievre and their support number comes down, he doesn't necessarily have to get that much more himself.
If you look at some of our recent past polling, John, one of the things you'll find is that the ceiling for the Conservatives in the best possible scenario on the best day could be as high as 50+%, 54%. On the worst day, however, it sinks to 27%. If there are enough left of center voters, and it's important for everyone to remember that the country in terms of vote intention and small p politics skews more left and center left than right and center right. It's just, that's the math. I know a lot of people watching this will start throwing eggs at the screen at this point, but that's the reality of it. If you find that if the Liberals are able to really square and frame this election as some sort of existential battle between the heart of the right and the heart of the left, they will be able to count on, number one, a lot of disaffected and soft Liberal voters possibly coming back, but also drawing NDP votes. That's a bad day for Jagmeet Singh. But that is how they found and carved a path to victory over the last 2 elections and have the potential to do it again. And the big question then becomes, is the appetite for change something that is so strong that it supersedes any reservations that center-left voters may have in casting a ballot for Pierre Poilievre or seeing Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives in government, especially when we start to see other issues pop into the narrative. So we talk about the culture wars or gender or those types of things. Where have the Conservatives done well in talking about one thing that is not particularly ideologically sensitive? And that's
would be representing
affordability.
that institute.
That's cost
really.
of living.
So
You can be left of center or right of center and care about cost of living. It's when those other issues come in that people start to delineate in terms of their voting intentions.
And housing affordability, which obviously swings a lot of younger voters.
That
Same deal.
too.
And to me, that's not an issue that's going to be cured even if rate cuts start coming in. It's a supply issue, right?
I mean, there are many who say that it's a supply issue. There are others that talk about the commodification of housing and, make it less of a commodity, and that will deal with it. We've obviously had, the collective we, the chattering classes, have also had conversations about where immigration, particularly with students, come into this and the upward pressures around that. In terms of adequate supply, no. The zoning changes that are happening today are not going to create the housing needed in time for the next election. But other aspects of it, particularly around cost of living, cost of groceries, hydro, electricity, all of those upward cost pressures that come from inflation, those have the potential to come down. So it's sort of a bit of a wait and see, which is why none of us expect to see an election anytime soon.
So, well, let's talk about Jagmeet Singh, because your poll has him viewed quite favourably. He has secured, apparently, big policy gains with dental care and pharmacare from the Liberals. Yet his party is becalmed in the polls. More Liberals seem to be happy with the confidence and supply agreement than New Democrats, and I can see why. The pharmacare bill to me was a very thin piece of legislation, and I don't know why they didn't push harder to get what they wanted. But do you think Singh needs to be more forceful as a leader if he's going to position himself as the alternative to Pierre Poilievre, for example?
That's an interesting question, I feel like that's a better question asked of Singh's strategists than me. However, what I would say is history can be instructive in situations like this. We know, for example, that it's rarely the junior partner in these types of agreements, whether it's in a provincial legislature or whether it's in Parliament, that comes out the better for it. We know that from examples in the United Kingdom. We know that from examples in Ontario going back to the Ray and Peterson era. I know that sitting here in British Columbia from previous legislatures as well and minority governments. So Mr. Singh will be doing well to continue to push for what he can push for in this situation, because based on what history tells us, it is unlikely that voters will go, oh gosh, thanks Jagmeet Singh, thanks for all of that, and now I'm going to go cast my vote for the NDP, while Justin Trudeau is flapping in my ear saying, vote for that guy, you're actually electing Poilievre. And that will be the conundrum for left of center voters. The story of the NDP is it's not the worst of times, but it's not the best of times. So the worst of times you and I will know, was when the NDP was mired in single digit numbers for quite a long time. Jagmeet Singh has managed to keep hold of the tiller in the post-Leighton years, keep the numbers at about 1 in 5, and that's where the NDP is consistently and solidly, anywhere between 16 and 23%, never lower, never higher, really, maybe 24, but I can't remember off the top of my head seeing them higher than 25 anytime recently. So that data point that you mentioned just off the top of the show about the Liberals being almost, in a place where they're competing for those NDP votes, that may have the NDP sort of getting a bit of a gleam in their eye and saying, there's an opportunity here. But it's also important to remember that Jagmeet Singh consistently polls as one of the most popular, personally popular leaders in the country. It has not translated into votes. He suffers a little bit from what I would call maybe Elizabeth May syndrome or Green Party syndrome. And I say this lovingly, Elizabeth, if you happen to see this, it's that people absolutely love the leader, like the leader a lot. It doesn't translate into the ballot box.
I went on the campaign trail with all three campaigns in 2021, and the most fun by far was the NDP, and they still believe in it all. It was kind of an antidote to the cynicism of other campaigns. But, all those ridings we went around, particularly in Vancouver, BC, I think only one or two of them came over. And I think they were hitting on the wrong issues. People like him, but they don't see him. They still think he's a bit lightweight, I think. Just looking, I think we've kind of mapped out how it is still possible for Justin Trudeau to be the comeback kid.
Like, stranger things have happened. Planes get hit by lightning and they keep flying.
Right.
But it's rare.
Big but, the thing you mentioned, which seems to make that unlikely, is the time for change number. And looking regionally in the poll, not many bright spots for the Liberals. In Ontario, the Conservatives are on track to double their seat count as they did in 2011. They've got 37 MPs at the moment. Quebec, the Liberals are in third place, which must be, given all that they've done for Quebec, must be very discouraging, which would essentially leave them an island on the island of Montreal, just their Montreal MPs, I think. It's a long way from election day, as we've mentioned, but it does feel like a save the furniture campaign, don't you think? Unless something major happens that we can't see.
And this is where the fulsomeness of time and the tightening of polls, and again, I would say over under on likelihood, yes. It seems by all accounts today in March of 2024 that the next election, whenever it happens, is more likely to be a change election than not a change election. But would it be a majority or a minority? Will disaffected, angry, annoyed Liberals continue to park their votes with the Conservatives, or will they have a moment of a gut check? So much of this, at the end of the day, we focus a lot on, can Justin Trudeau do it? Can he do a four-peat? Can he be the comeback kid? So much of this will actually be a referendum as well on Pierre Poilievre. And if the Liberals are able to frame it that way, that is probably their best and brightest hope. And that's where message discipline, not only from the Conservative leader, which we've seen him wobble on a few times in the last couple of months, after a very long run of really tight message discipline, not only from the leader, but from his caucus, from his candidates. You can't have bozo eruptions. You can't have caucus members or candidates saying things that are politically unpalatable to that tiny, tiny swing slice of voters who, it's the thin edge. Just stay on cost of living, they'll come with you. Deviate from that, they might walk away. And so that's where the length of time and the fulsomeness of time to do that, you're running a marathon at this point if we don't expect an election until next year. It's a lot different between running a race and running a marathon. I would say that...
Well, that just about wraps up that one. And now this next couple of pieces is some of our history and the Oka crisis. I was really like a preteen back then, and I remember seeing it though, and that it was scary. But times have dramatically changed. I can't see a government trying to do that. Everything is so different than it used to be. Anyways, here's the Oka crisis. Real wild stuff.
Good evening. At one point, there were as many as 12 native barricades in Quebec, but tonight only one is still standing. It's the one that triggered the whole dispute, the one that Quebec police tried to storm 53 days ago, the one in Oka. Mohawks erected that barricade last March. They were trying to prevent the town from expanding a 9-hole golf course on what they claim is ancestral land. Tonight, the barricade is completely surrounded by the Canadian Army. The soldiers have dug themselves in after a day of high tension and drama. It all began at about 1 o'clock Eastern Time this afternoon. Army units moved in here at a location the Mohawks refer to as the North Pole. Soldiers also took this barricade on the western edge of the community. Then they pressed on toward the final blockade. It all seemed pretty easy, that is, until they reached the center of the Indian land and things came to a dramatic climax. The CBC's Neil MacDonald was there.
Instead of moving on the Oka barricades by road, the Army chose the terrain it likes best, the forest, moving in from behind, coming in the back way. When they rolled, it was swift. The warriors met them on a dirt road deep inside the Indian territory.
We're gonna start swinging our
The infantry major in charge made it clear he was heading for the barricades at any cost and that bullets would be met with bullets.
As soon as I'm able to move forward, I move forward.
Are you moving right through to the barricades?
There's a barricade down there? Yes, sir. I've taken 3 barricades now.
The warriors were nearing hysteria at the sight of soldiers near their tribal cemetery.
Somebody give me fucking permission to slug that fucking guy.
Get back! Get back! Hey!
Then something remarkable. Mohawk women assumed command and cleared their men.
You get back, stay back, I'll fucking kick your ass.
Run! Shoot! Shoot, you fucker!
Get him out of here!
Shoot! Bang! Come on! Come on! Bang! Come on, then!
The warriors calmed down, although not much, and they took to taunting the soldiers face to face.
I must be number 1 on your list, eh? Or you're number 1 on my list, too.
A little bit nervous, perhaps? Do you think? You nervous? Should be. Motherfuckers.
But the Mohawk threats and rifles had little effect on the soldiers. They continued to advance relentlessly throughout the day, and by evening they were here in the very center of the Kanesatake encampment. They were at the edge of the sacred Mohawk cemetery and near the very spot where the Quebec police officer was killed weeks ago. They were also within about a 1-minute march from the main Indian barricade.
Restez calme, bougez pas, pointez pas d'armes.
And the soldiers followed the methods they'd followed all along, telling the Mohawks not to shoot first or they would shoot back. Oka's golfers have been playing the town's little 9-hole course for more than...
Sorry, gang, but we are running a live show here. So that was one video about Oka, which is deeply disturbing, right? Like, I remember now, I downloaded that video. I didn't watch it until this because I wanted it to be authentic, and it's upsetting to watch that. I do not like watching that kind of violence. I don't care about the right or the wrong of it. I just don't like seeing the those automatic weapons guys. Those are no joke. And then seeing those women panic. Anyways, we've got a little bit more about the Oka. And this is a little bit of the history rather than like what the dispute was based on. These things did happen.
30 years now, coexisting uneasily with the local Mohawk band. But when the course announced plans to expand onto other land considered sacred, the Kanesatake Mohawks took to the barricades, and they've been there ever since.
It was a bloody day at the Mohawk Indian community in Oka, Quebec, near Montreal. Provincial police in riot gear stormed the barricades the Mohawks had set up. There were clouds of tear gas, a hail of bullets, and in the midst of the battle, a policeman was killed. Tonight, it's a standoff, the situation very tense.
What kind of people are you? There's children here and you're shooting tear gas at us.
As promised, the army rolled into Oka and Chateauguay today. Police barricades that have stood for 41 days were quickly removed, replaced with barbed wire, much heavier firepower, and solid armor. The Mohawk warriors who had so often threatened armed resistance were simply herded ahead of the rolling armor.
From here on in, I guess we're going to be burying each other.
The warriors were nearing hysteria at the sight of soldiers near their tribal cemetery.
Get back! Get back! Hey!
Then something remarkable. Mohawk women assumed command and cleared their men.
You get back, stay back, I'll kick your ass.
Run! Shoot!
Get him out of here!
Shoot! Bang!
The warriors calmed down, although not much, and they took to taunting the soldiers face to face.
Nervous, perhaps? Do you think? You nervous?
To begin with, it seemed almost nonchalant. The first few Mohawks out of the compound just started down the hill towards the town of Oka.
Hey, this guy's got a knife! Stop!
Then warriors began to emerge, showing defiance instead of surrendering to the army as they were expected to do.
Okay, les journalistes, back off a bit! Back off! Back off!
The Mohawks who managed to get through the army lines walked smack into the arms of the waiting Quebec police. The army said there were over 50 people taken away from the warrior camp, including 23 warriors. By 9:30 tonight, the army was beginning to pull out at the end of their 2.5-month siege.
So, but this is working right now. I know for a matter of fact this is working. Oops, whoa.
Okay.
So, whoa, I missed it. What are we doing here, gang? Sorry, everybody. Sorry. That video ended very quickly. We're jumping into a quick video with one of our really cool viewers. And this is Guy. We're going to find out who this guy is. Let's take a peek.
Work out and camp. I cook for a living.
Oh, that's great, man. I used to work oil rigs, and the best part was always the food. Like, they would not let you down, so I bet you're a talented chef.
I assume so.
Yeah. No,
definitely. Not very many, no.
Don't bite the hand that feeds you, literally.
Yep.
How long have you been at that?
20 years.
Oh, Lord. I'm surprised.
Yep.
You don't look like you're old enough to have been at that for 20 years.
Yeah, no, I've been cooking since I was about 15.
Oh, wow. That's a lot. It's been a while. Cool. So next thing I'm going to ask, do you have any favorite politicians? Like, what got you into politics? Was it because you were tired of how things have become? Or was it, oh, I saw Pierre Poilievre and I was intrigued? Or you're just a big JAGMEET fan? What got you into watching politics?
Just the way that the way that Canada has been going downhill. And when I first started watching Poilievre, he got me pretty interested. And the
guy, man, he's well spoken, pretty sharp, funny sometimes. Like, I'm not like that, but he's not a bad guy to look at. Like, so I can get why somebody could be engaged by Poilievre.
He's not scared of telling people what he thinks, and he's a straight shooter.
He seems to me like a guy that if I bumped into him at the grocery store, I'd have no problem having a conversation. But if I bumped into Trudeau at the grocery store, it'd be like just weird. A conversation I do not want to partake in.
No, you might get arrested for it.
You might get thrown in the jail. Thrown in the slammer.
Yeah. But right now, honestly, Poilievre is probably one of my most favorite politicians right now. Besides, I really like Danielle Smith too.
Yeah, no, Danielle Smith is outside of federal politics. To be the most engaging or the most watched politician outside of federal politics in Canada. Like, the way she speaks, she's a good-looking lady too. That helps. But she's so smart, and there's depth, there's layers to all of her answers, you know?
Yeah.
You're lucky in Alberta for that, to have her now. 'Cause in these times, like, again,
we need somebody.
I don't like to even bring it up, but some of that transgender stuff that she's put her foot down and, like, enough is enough.
Yeah.
It's a good time to protect the kids, man, because, like, you can say you're going to protect the kids and do the Online Harms Act like the Liberals are planning on doing, or you could really protect children like Smith is doing.
Yeah, because in the end, our children are our futures.
Well, how old's your little one?
3.
So that's got to be a nerve-wracking time. Like, coming out into this world, like, who knows what things are going to be like in 10 years.
Oh, you know, and I really hope that she doesn't see this part of Canada, because that's not how I grew up. You know, we all had pride in Canada and the way and just the wholesomeness of Canadians.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened to the confidence, and I don't blame the young people. I'm not saying there's blame, but things have changed so much, and it's almost like you're not allowed to be a proud Canadian.
No.
That we've got to just be so woke that we're not even proud. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't seem like a good plan for the long game.
No, it's not. And you know, and you got to worry about offending people nowadays. You know, and you're not allowed to have your own opinions.
You really aren't. Like, I understand what you mean, but in the same moment, it's like, oh, be careful what you say, Ehren, because you have to be woke enough just to like even dance around the question. And it's just like, I'm kind of a golden rule type of guy, like do unto others, and I think that'll just be fine. But instead, you have to be and I know in my heart, I'm a good person. I do anything for my friends, family, whatever, like.
Yeah.
But you're nervous about like offending people saying anything.
Yeah. You know, and it like you're scared of even saying something because it could wind you up in jail.
Well, with this bill C-63, somebody doesn't even need to say who they are that reports something you said that they consider like could be hateful or considered hate speech, and it puts you in the clink. Like,
yep.
What kind of dictatorship are we talking about here, bro? Like, none of that makes any sense to me. Like, and it scares me because there's a few of these liberals I don't care for, and I've kind of shared that, but like, I don't hate them or I don't say like, oh, go get these people. But it might come back later on and get thrown away for like an opinion that was accurate.
Yeah.
Like, remember during COVID when people were saying like, oh, vaccines might not be a good idea, you'd get shut down?
Yeah.
It turns out those vaccines weren't a good idea. Like, and I think you're allowed to say that now, but it's so controlling. Like the can't even say it. Say it for me.
Authoritarian?
Yes. Like, that side is coming out.
Yeah, no, agreed. You know, because when the government starts forcing you to take chemicals and put them in your body, that you should have the choice whether to say no, yes or no to.
Or you get fired. Like it wasn't like there was like, oh, we'll see what happens in 6 months. It was a very hard line and stiff-armed. That they pulled off the Emergencies Act enactment that they did and are like since have been found guilty, but they're saying, oh no, we're gonna appeal the guilty verdict. Like, it's just a really concerning that we're so far away from an election. Like, they can do so much more damage in the meantime, and it seems like they're trying. Like, a bunch of wacky bills they're trying to put through.
Like, it's absolutely ridiculous, and how they're getting these bills through, I have no idea. Like,
in my like, from the little bit that I've learned over the last few months, it's because they corrupted the Senate. Like, the Senate, it was always like liberal conservative, and then a few years ago in 2019, Trudeau declared it was going to be a independent Senate and that there was no more caucuses. But the conservatives kept their liberal senator caucus, but all the other groups are just liberal senators now. And so you're looking at about a 70-30 vote in the Senate. And the Senate gets the final say on all the bills. Like,
literally bought and paid for.
Literally bought and paid for, like, because they donated to the company, then they got the jobs, and now they're getting paid back. Like, it's wicked. Like, I do think that there's a solution. We need an election, and it needs to go the right way, and it looks like it will. And then we also need Poilievre to come through for us and his amazing army. There's a lot of clever MPs that he's got. Like, there's a lot of MPs from Alberta. Who's your MP?
That one, I don't know what her name is. I never really got involved with knowing what the MPs are, but she's right down on Main Street.
Is she younger or older?
No idea. I honestly don't know.
No idea. Cool. We can find it's probably up by Edmonton. Oh Lord, I think you've got NDP. I think you've got Heather McPherson.
Which is possible.
We're gonna find out. We're gonna find out because I'll feel very proud of myself if I was able just to figure out because most of the MPs in Alberta are conservative, right? But
yeah.
There's I think 2 NDP MPs, and I think in Edmonton it's Heather McPherson.
Okay, yeah, because I know we have one out in Vegreville there, but I don't know if it's.
All right, guys. Sorry. That's a very interesting piece that I did with my friend Dustin that I met through this channel, which I find all that stuff so super exciting that I'm meeting people that are not the same as me. They're not, but they're similar, like in the way that they think. But now what we're going to do, we did one of these yesterday. We showed my very first question period that I'd ever tried. And when I watched it, I was surprised at my personality. Like, I kind of feel that watching these Canadian politics over the last number of months and doing these shows has gotten me down a little bit. Like, maybe I've just been watching too many sad things and focusing on the dark stuff. I love doing the question periods. They're light. It's a pageant. It's like, anyhow, we're going to take another look at one of the very first ones that I did. And again, at the time I was trying, this is my hat. Like, and it, not that it's part of my image or part of me, but I wear this, I wear it in bed. Like, but I was trying to come up with a gimmick. And you'll see that. Anyway, I'm sorry to everybody for the terrible volume that was probably rotten. I'll pay more attention to that in the future. Here we go, though. This is I think the third, maybe the fourth question period Canada that I did. This stuff is fun to watch, guys. It's like wrestling or something. Like, I've got no horse in the race, so to say. But I'm tired of just being bored with Canadian politics and sort of hands in the air. I think that we need change, and the way that we start changing things is knowing what is going on. Yeah, I think we're getting ready to go here, guys.
Colleagues, before we proceed,
let's check it out.
The new speaker, sometimes I don't
This
know
is
where
our new
everybody
speaker,
actually sits in the
Greg
House.
Fergus.
For declarations from members, I'd like to remind all members to please be in your seat to make your declaration. There was one case today, but the new car smell is okay. So I need you guys to make
making
sure that you take care
a
of
joke
that, and
again
you stay
about a
in your
car.
seat.
He
Go
said
to your seats before
no
making
dents
that
on the
statement.
first day, and that was the other day. Now I think this is day 3.
Questions, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Sounds like Ian Handemansing. Let's go, PIERRE Poilievre. Let's get it fired up. Let's get it going.
After 8 years of this Prime Minister, it's not worth the cost. For example, a month ago, after a big photo op, he promised to bring down the cost of a Thanksgiving dinner. But we can see today nothing other than another photo op. But Canadians can't eat photo ops, Mr. Speaker. They need turkey. They need other food to eat. And what has gone up since this government took office by almost 70%, the cost of turkey. Will they reverse those increases?
I just hope Trudeau showed up today. He's been playing hooky a lot.
The Honourable Minister.
I'd
I'd like to thank the
This
Leader
guy's
of the
not
Opposition
bad,
for his
but
question. What Canadians know
where's our
is
leader?
not to take his advice on economics. The last piece of advice he has was to
Good
invest
one.
in
Good
crypto.
line.
And now
Good
he's
one.
suggesting to Canadians that they should buy turkey that costs $120. I think they can get it a lot cheaper than that, Mr. Speaker. If the Conservatives want to do something for Canadians, they should vote for C-56
Good
and
on
help
you, Francois.
Canadians now.
Good on you, Francois. Don't just take it laying down. What's Poilievre going to say to that?
The opposition, Mr. Speaker, what is clear is that this minister is the turkey in this joke.
Oh.
When you look at flyers,
Who's the turkey?
You can see.
He said turkeys were $120, though. I don't think they are.
Conservative rule. Turkey was $1.49 a pound, and now it's $2.49. It's a 67% increase after eight years
$20 turkey
of
would
this
have to be a
Prime
pretty
Minister
big
and his
turkey.
carbon taxes, which are causing costs to go up for farmers and for truckers and so on, and ultimately for consumers of groceries. Will the government reverse these exorbitant increases by Thanksgiving?
Not your
yes
best performance,
or no,
Pierre. That
in
wasn't
4
your best
days?
one, because the math on that, when you said $120 turkey the other day, doesn't add up.
Before I turn it over to the
Come on,
minister
Greg.
to answer the question, I'd like to remind all members that it's important.
Nice
we
tie. I
shouldn't
like that.
compare a member to
come on.
To an animal, for example. The Honourable Minister.
Bullshit. Come on, guys.
Thank you for your intervention, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to commend you on your new role. This was my first chance to do so.
He's
This
pretty
is
good.
no joke, Mr. Speaker. I hope Canadians watching today realize there's no joke here. We came up with a 5-point plan. We called on the major grocery chains to do their fair share to help Canadians. Secondly, we created a specific office to help Canadians on issues of shrinkflation. Third, we want a grocery code of conduct signed. Fourth, we want to help equalize bargaining power. And
Do you think the 5 major grocers are going to decide to do any of that?
8 years.
They don't
this
make
Prime
the rules,
Minister's
they're not
not
gonna
worth
sign
the
it.
cost of food. For example, the price of turkey is up at Loblaws by 67% after 8 years of this Prime Minister's carbon taxes. And all they offered, since they promised to bring prices down by Thanksgiving, is a code of conduct, an office, and a photo op. You can't eat any of those 3 things. They won't be on the Thanksgiving dinner table. So what will they do in the next 4 days to reverse the 67% increase in the cost of a turkey at Loblaws, just like they promised they would, Mr. Speaker?
Why would they make that promise? It was a silly promise to make, like a month. How are you going to do that?
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from this conservative, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, Francois getting them fired up.
The leader, Mr. Speaker, advised Canadians was to buy crypto, Mr. Speaker, and now he's suggesting to Canadians to buy a turkey at $120. I found a butterball for him, Mr. Speaker, $30.
He's getting them fired up, guys. He's getting them fired up. Pretty fun. Way to go, Francois. It's going. No, Greg doesn't like that, though. He's going to lay down the law now. Oh, boring Greg. With that Ian Hannamancing voice. Listen to Ian Hannamancing. Listen.
All right, we got the first scratch. I'd like to
It's a
remind
car joke
members,
again. It's gone too far. That's
all
enough.
members,
Drop
please,
the
that
car joke.
props are not acceptable in the House of Commons. It's about the debate.
Come on. Let them have some fun.
the Honourable Minister.
Shopping for the Leader of the Opposition to help him. But, Mr. Speaker, if they want to do something for Canadian, not just asking questions, but do something. Vote for C56, Mr. Speaker. It's going to help Canadians. It's going to stabilize price in Canada. And it's going to bring competition in this country. That's what we need. It's for them to act, Mr. Speaker.
Ooh, he's hot, guys. He's hot today. It is fun, see? It's fun.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Fast that Canadians didn't want champagne for Thanksgiving. They just want some food. And I did a little bit of price shopping on that for him. In the last days of the Conservative government, the price for a pound of turkey was $1.49. And the flyers today show it's $2.49, a 70% increase. And I might add that the picture of the turkey during the Conservative years was a big, plump, beautiful bird, whereas right now it's a skimpy, shrimpy little thing that looks like it's been taxed to death. Mr. Speaker, why would they get
open mic night
of the turkey so that we
for
can have
Pierre
a nice dinner
Poilievre.
for Thanksgiving?
He's a pretty funny guy, man. Politician, so watch out. But it's fun.
Speaker,
Get him going again.
the opposition
Get
can
him
have
going.
as much as he wants. But one thing I can tell you, Canadians have no fun these days, Mr. Speaker. Because they know. Because they know. Because they know.
Make the crypto joke again. Hey, no. Put him in his place. Man, this guy's pretty good. Technology minister, I believe. They're having a good time in the house. Oh, Greg's going to step in and ruin the fun, though.
Settle down.
Settle down, man.
Hello.
Come on, bud.
The Honourable Minister.
Friendly looking, though, with
23 seconds
very
left.
pretty
Mr.
bow
Speaker, I
tie.
hope that I have as much energy to support our bill, Mr. Speaker, to make a difference in the life of Canadians. Because, Mr. Speaker, this is not a joke, Mr. Speaker. Canadians expect action. That's what we've taken this morning with a 5-item action plan to help stabilize pricing in Canada. And if the Conservatives want to keep laughing and make jokes, Mr. Speaker, tell that to Canadians, which expect them to approve Bill 66, reform competition, more lower prices in Canada, and make sure that Canadians can have what they deserve from the situation.
Yeah. Ooh. So hot he burnt his tongue.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Minister accidentally told the truth there for a second.
Whoops.
He said Canadians aren't having any fun, and he's got that right, because after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not
He's making it for
worth
now.
the cost. He says we should energetically support his bills. Well, he's been forcing, and his Prime Minister has been forcing Canadians to support Liberal bills for 8 years, and the bill is way too high. Food prices are up more than 20% in 2 years, the fastest increase in interest rates in monetary history. Why won't they stop sending Canadians the bill and let Canadians afford to eat, heat, and house themselves this Thanksgiving?
All right. We're kind of hoping that maybe Sean Fraser, the Birdman, gets in there. He's fun.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Leader of the Opposition. He's coming actually to some sense. He realized that the best way to help Canadians is to support the government, Mr. Speaker, because this is a time where all parliamentarians needs to come together, Mr. Speaker. That's why we presented a plan that's going to help to stabilize prices in Canada, that's going to increase competition in this country, and it's going to take measures to help Canadians. Mr. Speaker, if he wants to give a gift to Canadians for Thanksgiving, why don't he support C-56 and show Canadians that he can do something for them?
Running out of energy, I think. Used it all up.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, it's funny. It's always complicated for
This
Liberals
is fun,
to
guys.
defend French in Quebec. Take, for example, the Minister
Like,
of Immigration.
subscribe, we're having
Yesterday
fun.
in committee, he simply couldn't acknowledge a basic fact that all the indicators point to: French is in decline in Quebec. No way. It's like James Bond under torture, refusing to talk. Oddly enough, it reminded us of the debates over C-13, the official languages reform. The minister was one of the West Island Liberals who fought against better protection for French.
sour he
Is
is,
that a
man.
coincidence? The Honourable Minister. Mr.
Yes.
Speaker,
Dos Equis.
we need to be careful.
Most interesting
with
man in the
the
world.
Statistics. More people than ever before are able to speak French. But if you're talking about the language used at home, when I was young, I spoke Spanish at home, but I'm a francophone.
Interesting.
I spoke Spanish at home, but at school, at hockey, at work, I always spoke French, Mr. Speaker. So Bill 101 is working in Quebec. That's what proves it. The Bloc can cry foul, but the fact is that there are more French speakers than ever before, and this government will always endeavor to do more every day, and that there will be more French speakers every day. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the Minister of Immigration here. The federal government increased the number of temporary immigrants to Quebec by 150,000 people this year. Quebec is worried about its settlement capacity, and the Quebec immigration minister discussed this with the federal minister, but said that the concept of settlement capacity was not part of his thinking. The same minister who has all the trouble in the world admitting French
he can
is
read.
threatened, he doesn't recognize that settlement
When they
capacity
read, it
has
sucks.
to be part of his
Pay
thinking on
attention to
immigration.
that.
Do we
When they
really
read,
have to
it's no
explain
fun.
that to him? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker. The figure the member opposite is referring to is mother tongue. That excludes me and a whole bunch of other ministers. I am a proud Quebecer, proud of being so, proud to say so, but the statistic he's referring to is mother tongue. But we should be proud of the high number of people who can speak French in Quebec, and the member should be ashamed of using statistics the way he is. I'm a proud Quebecer and a proud speaker of French.
Did a politician just try to manipulate statistics?
For Burnaby South. Thank you.
21 months since food prices have outpaced general inflation. Almost, and the Prime Minister wasn't willing to do anything until he started falling behind in the polls. That's 2 years that Canadians have been struggling because this government's unwilling to take on the real problem, which is corporate greed. Now, will the government admit that their plan to scramble and try to do something is to save themselves, not Canadians?
He's a handsome man. Just had great hope for him. Did you? Did you used to care?
Mr. Speaker, I beg to differ. We actually have been putting in place programs to support Canadians, bill after bill, law after law. 11 million Canadians with the grocery rebate, Mr. Speaker. 4.2 million Canadians with the workers' benefit. 6 million Canadians in increasing old age security. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because our government believes in investing in Canadians time after time, and we will continue to do that to build a stronger Canada. Thank you.
Watching this stuff makes me feel a little bit patriotic somehow. It might be the
courage to take on corporate greed when it comes to the price of groceries, nor when it comes to the privatization of our healthcare system. Shoppers Drug Mart, owned by Galen Weston, is rapidly expanding an American-style for-profit healthcare delivery in our country. And the government's nowhere to be seen. Last election, the Prime Minister said he would defend public universal healthcare, and now he calls privatization innovation. So what's the plan? Wait another 2 years and then ask Galen Weston nicely to stop?
Good question, Jimmy. Not a fan of Galen Weston, guys. Boo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And together we've made huge progress
in
reducing drug costs from Canadians by working together on bulk purchasing. $3.5 billion less is now spent by Canadians by reducing those costs. We need and must do much more. That's why we're continuing to work not only with the party opposite, the New Democrats, but with all parties with a strategy on rare diseases by introducing legislation on pharmacare. Together we can make sure that Canadians aren't faced with the impossible choice of essentials or the medicine they need.
Yeah. I don't know about this pharmacare, guys. Those drug companies have a little bit too much control on what they do.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, even Thanksgiving dinner has become unaffordable. Food banks across the country are overwhelmed. With Thanksgiving approaching, some food banks have made the tough decision of cutting back on distributing food because they just don't have enough to go around. The Liberals' carbon taxes have driven up the cost of Thanksgiving staples like potatoes by 77%. Will this Prime Minister reverse this 77% hike on Thanksgiving food before Thanksgiving, as he promised? Yes or no?
It's too dry, lady. Can't be that dry if you're reading from paper. Come on. Come on.
Mr. Speaker,
all right, here we go.
If the Conservative member wants to see
that
grocery
top pops
prices
into the
lowered,
screen. Holy cow.
I hope that she asks her leader why it is that the Conservatives continue to delay the legislation that is before this House. In fact, just this morning, I was so pleased to see the member from Mission, Mesquite, Fraser Canyon say that he supports Bill C-56. And I wonder if other Conservatives can convince their leader to support this bill, because Canadians are counting on all of us in this House to help stabilize grocery prices.
It's very, very calm. It's so you almost can't hear what she's saying. in one ear out the other.
Canadians are counting
Same
on
old.
immediate relief
Come on,
before
Leslie
Thanksgiving.
Lewis.
People are rationing food across this country. According to Food Banks Canada, people are making impossible choices between paying their rent
This
or
guy
putting
behind me
food
is
on the
falling
table
asleep.
for their families.
He's
This
actually going to
Liberal
fall asleep, the
NDP
guy behind me.
government
Look.
continues their inflationary spending, which has caused grocery
and
prices
over there, see
to
beside her?
increase by
Looks like Nicole Sullivan.
94%,
Matt TV.
as in the case with lettuce. Canadians are realizing that this Prime Minister just isn't worth the cost. Will this
All of
Prime
that for
Minister
that?
keep his
Come on,
promise
lady.
and reverse his punishing?
And they cut you off, Leslin. Talk too long, too boring. Get it together, woman. Come on.
Mr. Speaker, there are important measures that can be immediately
Her hair
implemented
looks so
in order
curly.
to help Canadians. But the problem is what we hear from the
Dark.
Conservatives
That's the
are
darkest
very
hair I've ever
sincere
seen.
concerns in question period. But then when it comes time to vote, Mr. Speaker, when it comes time to debate legislation, what we're seeing are procedural delay tactics and Conservatives voting against the interests of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I would urge everybody in this House to act in order to support Canadians, stabilize prices, and get more homes built in this country.
She's trying, guys. Give her a little credit. She's trying.
This will not be a happy
All right,
Thanksgiving
this guy
for
can be
many
fun
Canadian
sometimes.
families because food prices are absolutely out of control. And the NDP leader just said that food inflation has outpaced inflation over the last 20 months, which is coincidentally the length of the Liberal NDP coalition. What?
Hey, got to get rid of this coalition.
But the
It doesn't work.
fact is this: Canadian families are going to have to make the hard choice: feed their family or pay their rent. Will the Prime Minister finally recognize the damage he's done to Canada, keep his promise so they have an affordable Thanksgiving dinner?
Do you have a party that you favor? Do you favor the NDP, the Liberals, Conservatives,
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Bloc
Et comme je
Québécois, Green Party?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, we're taking concrete steps. They're on the
Come
table
on, Rachel.
right here in the
Get it
House. And I
going.
don't understand how the Conservatives can pretend to be sincere about their concern for Canadians while at the same time they're using procedural tactics to try to prevent us from helping Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it's beyond me. If the Conservatives want to be there for Canadians,
that's what they want.
they should pull up their socks and
get
get
a
down to
little
work
teapot.
and
And a
help
little
us
teapot.
help Canadians.
She's getting better. Good one, Rachel.
Mr. Speaker, only a party whose leader said, "I admire the basic dictatorship of China," would say legitimate debate about a government piece
Don't
of
wanna get quote saying
legislation
that.
is so inconvenient and an obstruction. That is a disgraceful comment and an opinion. But it's not a surprise from these Liberals whose leader admires the basic dictatorship. Mr. Speaker, everything they've done has done nothing to improve food affordability.
What's up,
After
Kenny?
8 long
Good to
years
see
of
you.
this Liberal government, Canadians
Happy Easter
can't
Monday.
pay for food. Will the Prime Minister keep his promise so Canadians can have an affordable Thanksgiving dinner?
Time is short, Prime Minister, if you're going to keep that promise. Time is getting really short. This just in, little Francois had to go to the hospital to be rehydrated. He exhausted himself.
Explain and debate what it is about cutting GST on the construction of new homes
Off the
that they
paper.
actually
Good job.
disagree with. What is it about strengthening competition laws to stabilize grocery prices here in Canada that they disagree with? Because I haven't heard a single argument in debate that has convinced any Canadian in this country that we shouldn't proceed with those measures, Mr. Speaker. And if the Conservatives want to help Canadians, they should be sincere in their actions. They should vote in the interests of Canadians.
She's the opposite of Francois. He blows it all like at one go, and she sort of works into it.
Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker,
Come on, Luke.
we would have
Luke
voted
usually comes with some fire.
for scrapping the carbon tax, which would have immediately affected all Canadians' pocketbooks. But instead, the Prime Minister made a big media show of saying he had brought together the food giants so that Canadians could afford their Thanksgiving dinners. He made that promise to Canadians, but food prices have increased potatoes by 67%, and so on. There's only 4 days left to bring prices down in time for Thanksgiving. After 8 years of empty promises, will he or won't he keep his promise to make Thanksgiving dinner affordable?
Are you going to be able to afford a turkey dinner this year?
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are very selective in choosing their facts.
In her house coat again.
But one thing they never talk about is the fact that what is driving up food prices is also climate change, because this year we had the worst harvests in almost all of Quebec and Canada, in all the regions. And it's so important to put a price on pollution and to combat climate change. And if there's one group who knows that, it's farmers. So we want to help farmers and Canadians. And if they do, they should be supporting our efforts to fight climate change.
Climate change is the problem. They're not going at it the right way.
Speaker, people in Chambly don't know how they're going to pay for their Thanksgiving turkey. Meanwhile, the leader of the Bloc Liberal coalition thinks he's the head of Quebec diplomacy, spending thousands of dollars on travel and greenhouse gas emissions to attend fancy cocktail parties to talk about what? The cost of living, rising rents, violence in Montreal, carbon tax hikes? No, he went to talk about independence. If you vote for the Bloc, you'll pay for it. Will the Prime Minister call his Bloc ambassador back home and tell him how he's going to keep his promise to lower food prices in time for Thanksgiving?
Proud of himself. Good job, I guess. Shouldn't be proud of yourself.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I think today's debate requires a bit of seriousness from the Conservatives. We're talking about the challenges Quebecers and Canadians are facing. The cost of living has gone up recently, and today we have taken steps. We have legislation to help Canadians lower the cost of rent and groceries, but the Conservatives are voting against everything we do, everything to fight climate change and so on. They should support C56 so that we can stabilize grocery prices, Mr. Speaker.
Phoebe in the back liked it.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
All right, guys. Clown circus. This guy's a finger sniffer.
Quebec
I've caught him.
Matching the federal contribution of $900 million
Clown circus,
for housing.
guys.
There's just one detail, one small detail. The money is still stuck in the federal coffers because the feds are trying to impose conditions on Quebec. This morning, Quebec's premier said that the clock is ticking. The agreement must be reached before November 7th. If it's to find its way into the economic update. Will the government put an end to this quibbling and immediately announce it will pay
nearsighted as well? He has to get real close.
$900 million. The clock is ticking.
Tick tock. I don't think it's going to happen though. Here we go. Dos Ackies.
That's great, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, we don't need threats or shouting or protests from the Bloc. I'll use a word they don't like much. It begins with a C and ends with it's complaining.
Okay.
They're here to complain and to squabble and to pick fights.
He's
but
interesting.
The fact is that we have negotiated $900 million for Quebec, and those negotiations will bear fruit because we will always stand up for
Fired
Quebec.
up. World's most interesting man.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, we're not the only ones. There are 10,000 students grumbling about the federal government right now in Quebec. Quebec's finance minister met with the Deputy Prime Minister, and listen to what he said. I repeated to her that it was urgent to sign the agreement, but the federal government is attaching strings, and that's unacceptable to us. Mr. Speaker, the announced that Quebec is doubling its contribution is supposed to be good news, but as long as the federal government is quibbling, that means it's not $900 million, but actually $1.8 billion lying dormant while we wait for Ottawa. When are they going to get down to work and announce that this money is coming?
He's popular too. He gets some applause.
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Oh, yes. Here we go.
Mr. Speaker, as
Here we go.
the member knows full well, I've been in discussion with my Quebec counterpart.
Go, Sean.
With a view to reaching a deal to flow federal funds for housing construction. We understand the priority of Quebec City.
Trusted with the responsibility of investing hundreds of millions of dollars. We do it sincerely, working alongside our provincial partners and ensure that Canadians receive the results of that funding.
What do you think of Sean, guys? He's handsome, man. He's well spoken too, but he's got this funny way that he moves.
Do you know why Quebec's the only province matching Ottawa's $900 million investment in housing? Because Quebec is the only province in Canada that invests in housing. Quebecers have made the progressive choice to invest in housing themselves. And instead of being held up as an example, the federal government is holding back $900 million in a classic flag-waving dispute for which they alone have the solution. It's enough's enough. Frapperu is in Ottawa today. This would be a great opportunity to announce that the squabbling is over and a deal has been reached. When will the government stop jerking us around and give us the $900 million?
Let's get it going.
What
do you think of that?
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What do we
the
have
only
here?
Thing we agree on
Also has very dark hair.
Between me and my colleague and Quebec is that there's urgency. And with Quebec City, we agreed in 2015 on a number of things, and we vote together for Quebec. What's bothering the Bloc right now is that they're not at the bargaining table, and they never will be. On the other side, there are Conservatives who want to take money away from the municipalities and don't trust the provinces. Mr. Speaker, we're going to work together with Quebec and come to a deal on housing.
Is that what we're doing? I don't think.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, it is clear that he is not worth the cost. He promised Canadians an affordable Thanksgiving, but all they are seeing are longer lines at the food bank. This NDP Liberal government is throwing off more crumbs than a stale loaf of bread. This half-baked loaf of higher deficits and carbon taxes is making it harder for Canadians to afford Thanksgiving. Will the Prime Minister deliver lower gas, lower grocery prices, or admit he made a turkey of a promise, one that's empty on the inside?
Would you need a piece of paper if that was all you were going to do with your day?
L'honorable ministre de la Santé.
Don't think that it would. Back 8 years ago, when 2.4 million more Canadians were in poverty, and we can ask what the government of Stephen Harper and the official opposition leader did at that point in time. They didn't do anything. And right now, as the global challenge, and yes, Canada has one of the lowest rates of food inflation in the world, but it's hitting us hard. And their solution: stop taking action on climate change, which is the very thing that is driving that problem, Mr. Speaker. The reality is they would cancel the rebate peoples would get, and yes, they would attack, as an example, 3.5 million seniors who are going to get dental care. They want to take that away. That's what they're really about.
It's interesting. Kind of got fired up there a little bit. Easy, bud.
London. Thank you very much. I'm hoping we can get the minister back to the conversation. Thanksgiving is normally a joyous celebration for families. However, this year, 7 million Canadians are struggling to put food on their table. After 8 years of after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government and across Canada, food bank visits are skyrocketing, with our highest level in Canadian history, according to the CEO of the Canadian Food Banks. This Prime Minister is worth not the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower prices or will he break his promise to all Canadians?
She had 6 cups of coffee. Triple sugar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And our government is focused on lowering grocery prices, and we have legislation on the table that will do that. But what are the Conservatives focused on? Well, in Alberta, they're trying to pull out of the Canada Pension Plan, Mr. Speaker. Canadians who have contributed their whole lives to the CPP, seniors who have contributed their whole lives to their pensions are having the rug pulled out from under them. Mr. Speaker, will the Conservative leader stand up in this House and tell his colleagues to keep their hands off of Canadians' pensions?
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière.
Don't touch my pension.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal government, after 8 long years of disastrous management, the government introduces Carbon Tax 2.0 with the help of the Bloc, who want to radically increase the carbon tax by voting for it twice. Mr. Speaker, if you vote for the Bloc, you'll pay for it.
His face.
You'll pay for it when you get your groceries, when you get gas, and so on. Why doesn't the Liberal government cancel its second Quebec carbon tax supported by the Bloc twice?
It's a good question. They're paying a lot of taxes in Quebec. Man, oh man.
The Honourable
second
Parliamentary
carbon
Secretary.
tax. Imagine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all,
Justin Terrell. He's
there
handsome.
is no federal carbon tax
Nice
in
tie.
Quebec because Quebec is a leader in combating climate change. Canadians are concerned about the cost of living and by climate change at the same time, and by the impact of natural disasters on our health and our economy. That's why we created a system that puts a price on pollution to meet their concerns. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The programs just aren't working, guys. Do you think they'll work? What do you think?
Mr. Speaker, we're facing an unprecedented housing
Looks like a
crisis
tall
caused by
man.
the Liberals and Conservatives.
Alexander's
In fact,
great.
we're seeing tents pop up more quickly than affordable housing. People are living in mold-filled apartments,
What's
but
up the
they
dirt
can't
road,
move
Mystic?
because
How
they
are
have nowhere
you?
to go. People
Welcome
are
to the
suffering,
chat.
but we know that there are solutions. Will the Liberals buy land and build housing on it that actually meets people's needs? Will they use public lands for public housing? Will they build social housing, housing co-ops, and community housing?
Can I have Ministre du Logement?
Speaker, I agree entirely with the
right.
need my honourable colleague has flagged to build more affordable housing. I agree that we should be using federally owned land to achieve that outcome. I agree that we should continue to make the investments under the National Housing Strategy that is now responsible for the construction or repair of nearly 500,000 homes across this country. I'll be the first to acknowledge that over the course of the past number of decades, governments of both Liberal and Conservative persuasion did not do what was necessary to get the job done. We changed that in 2017. We will continue to make the investments necessary to ensure that everyone in Canada has a place to call home.
He'd have trouble talking if he had his hands in his pockets, I think. Wouldn't be able to say a word.
Canadians, particularly
Side of his
Jewish,
mouth.
Polish, and Roma Canadians whose family members were murdered by Nazis demand answers. Meanwhile,
Bringing
the
it back up,
Liberals
the old Nazi
sit on a
gate.
secret report from Nazi war criminals who were welcomed into Canada after World War II. Mr. Speaker, we can learn
good.
from the lessons of the past and heal if this Liberal government is intent on keeping those secrets safe. So, will the Liberal government release the Deschamps report so Canadians can finally know who these Nazi war criminals were that were welcomed into Canada?
It's a good question. People deserve to know. Right? Do you feel like you need to know?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I'm not going to do anything.
Over the past 10 days in the House of Commons was completely unacceptable and embarrassing for all of us. The former Speaker of the House accepted full responsibility and resigned, which was the honourable thing to do. The Prime Minister apologised in this House. Our country has a dark history with respect to Nazis in this country, which is particularly hurtful to all Holocaust survivors, particularly the Jewish community in this country.
That's a good answer.
Senior officials and civil servants are looking carefully
bet it's
at
from
the
a piece of
Deschamps Commission
paper.
report and will be making recommendations soon on the options that are available. Merci.
All right.
Honourable member from Kitchener South, Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker, we know that Canadians are feeling the high cost of inflation. No family should have difficulty making ends meet and putting food on the table. Since 2015, our government has made significant investments to support Canadians and make life
Interesting
more
to
affordable.
read.
Can the President of the Treasury Board share what our government is doing to ensure that Canadians are getting the support they need while supporting a strong economy?
That's all she had to do with her whole day.
President of the Treasury Board.
And she had to
Mr. Speaker,
read.
félicitations. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her question today. Our government has always been there
that
to
color.
support Canadians, whether it's through the CEBA loan, Mr. Speaker, the grocery rebate, Mr. Speaker,
mauve?
the Canada Child Benefit, and the Canada Dental Benefit. The fact of the matter is we'll continue to invest in Canadians while prudently managing the
Sean is
fiscal
back there
purse.
dancing.
And
You
we
can
will
see
make
like
sure
he's
that we are
always
creating
moving.
jobs and building a strong economy for this country, Mr. Speaker. That's our goal, and we'll continue to work hard for Canadians. Thank you.
The honourable member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, the price
Perkins.
of everything is skyrocketing. Dalhousie University's food
like Ric
price
Flair of
report
the
states
WWE
that 64% of Canadians
Parliament.
are altering their food
Except he hasn't been
buying
around that
habits, moving to dollar stores for groceries and buying less nutritious food. 20% or 3% are eating less. The report blames energy and input costs for this food crisis. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower food prices by Thanksgiving, or will he break his promise to Canadians?
Not much was original about that. Come on. You guys got better players than that.
Secretary.
There are a number of measures that we have put on the table that will stabilize grocery prices.
It is more
that
fun
will
when
build
Trudeau's in the
more homes
House.
this country, and consistently, what we've seen from the
It's
Conservatives.
more fun when Lemonface,
Thankfully, this
CHYSTIA's in the
morning, we had
House.
a Conservative member stand up in this House and say that he was supportive of the government's legislation and that he would be voting for it. And so I wonder, are there other Conservatives
They're all playing
on
hooky.
their bench that are also of that view, and perhaps they could get together and speak to the Conservative leader, because I believe it's actually the Conservative leader that wants to delay help to Canadians.
My response would be every time, no matter what the question was, would be like, why did you recommend
Yes or
crypto?
no to my question, so I'll try again. Food Bank
Doing
Canada
better,
stated that
Rick.
at
Doing
this
better.
time of year, the number of people turning to food banks is growing. And what happens is that people are forced to make impossible choices. Choices like paying rent or buying food. NDP Liberal food inflation is driving food bank usage to its highest levels since Pierre Trudeau 42 years ago. After 8 years, the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower food prices
Running out
by
of steam, though.
Thanksgiving, or will he break his promise to Canadians again?
I think Rachel there beside him must have winked at him between.
Mr. Speaker, I find it curious that my
questions.
honourable colleague is standing up only now to defend the interests of low-income families who might need the services that food banks provide, when his party, over the course of my time in this chamber, has consistently voted against the measures that would make life more affordable for them. I look back to when we first formed government, when we raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% and cut them for the middle class, and they voted against it. When we changed the Canada Child Benefit and stopped sending checks to millionaires so we could put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families, he voted against it. Every step of the way, including voting to support, opposing support for food banks during the pandemic, they couldn't get behind it. Will he now vote for the measures that can have a direct impact on the price of groceries and support C-50?
Interesting question. You should see him with glow sticks. You should see sexy Sean go with glow sticks. Sean Slick.
After 8 years
Oh, little bow tie.
Food bank
Clifford
usage
Small
in
has a
Newfoundland
little
and
bow tie.
Labrador is at a 42-year high. Well, make no wonder, according to the PBO, carbon tax 1 and 2 is going to cost households in my province an extra $2,166 per year. After yesterday's vote,
His shirt
where
is
23
also tight.
Atlantic Liberal MPs voted to support this
For different
suffering,
reasons.
folks back home say this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So will this NDP Liberal government finally be the servant and not the master and axe the tax?
That's the tax. The coalition government's an issue, guys.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The agri-food sector has
Pretty
endured
boy.
more extreme weather events,
Adam
particularly
Van.
in the province
Boom.
of that member. That's increasing
Well
severe and
spoken,
frequent
too.
storms, soil erosion, sporadic and unpredicted rainfall, higher than ever temperatures,
clip. He's
including here in
classy.
Ottawa in the last 3 days. Mr. Speaker, that all results from climate change. But as farmers always do, they've persevered and they've developed and implemented more environmentally friendly on-farm practices, and they've reduced their emissions. Our government is supporting them every step of the way through that process, and we'll make sure that we continue to be there for farmers and consumers when it comes to lowering food prices.
He is well spoken and he's really pretty.
Coastal Bay, Central Notre
Right?
Dame.
You not find that he
8
is?
years, Mr. Speaker, the member
Okay.
from Milton should be
He's
able
back.
to do a better job than that with answering a question. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians want answers. According to CTV's news report, many will not be able to afford a turkey dinner this Thanksgiving. With vegetables and turkey up around 70%.
Don't you
in
worry
just
about it,
8
little
years,
fella.
The NDP Liberal carbon tax is now taking food off tables. So will the Costly Coalition listen to the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador and axe the tax?
It's easy to be the heel side, right? No matter what you do,
Mr.
like
Speaker,
you're just
what
trying to
that
get a
member from
rise.
Newfoundland won't say is that next week climate action incentive payments will be arriving in the bank accounts of his constituents, and he should make sure that they know that's coming. Mr. Speaker, if that member really believes in affordability, then he ought to vote for Bill C-56 and the Atlantic Accord, which he's standing against. But Mr. Speaker, this
How
is
small
not
are
your
those
parents'
payments?
Conservative Party. Mr. Speaker, the Progressive Conservatives stood up against things like acid rain and created solutions. But this Conservative leader leader, the member from Carleton, doesn't believe in climate change. He's spun on his heels. They've ditched progressive values, and they don't care about fighting climate change or fighting for lower grocery prices. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
They're hiding behind the environment. I kind of like that guy, but that was a crap answer.
The honourable member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker,
Yeah.
September 2023
Christina,
was the hottest month ever
Michaud.
recorded.
Bloc Québécois,
The
read it from
water
paper,
temperatures
though.
in the Gulf of St. Lawrence reached record levels. These are unprecedented ocean heat waves.
They all
In the
have such dark hair.
Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region, there are plantations that were planted to limit our carbon footprint, but they burned during the wildfires.
So many have.
And meanwhile, a report tells us that the federal government will increase oil production to record levels in the next 2 years. It will open the floodgates of its Trans Mountain pipeline in January. It's very discouraging. How is it that the Minister of the Environment doesn't realize this?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I
What you
agree
got this time?
with my colleague that it's very important to reduce our impact on the environment. That is why our government has set a threshold for oil and gas sector emissions. And we have continued with our plan for emissions reduction. Oil and gas companies, Mr. Speaker, have
Word
proved
for
on numerous
word. He's
occasions
not
that
even
they are
looking up.
capable of innovating
Losing points, but
and implementing new competitive technology. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Repentigny.
they don't prepare for these things?
Mr. Speaker, it's 30 degrees in October.
I like
Something
Manic,
is
too.
not
She-
right,
she goes
Mr.
sometimes
Speaker.
well. She goes well
More and
sometimes.
more experts believe
Danielle
that
Negreanu
the
above me.
1.5 degree increase that we wanted to avoid even by the end of the century will actually be passed by 2030. But, as the Minister of the Environment likes to point out, Canada is an oil-producing country.
Bright
and instead
blue.
of reducing our production,
Bright blue.
we will be increasing it and breaking all of our previous records within 2 years. Canada is throwing fuel on the fire. The Minister of the Environment used to be a green activist. Is this really the legacy that he wants to leave?
Rolling up her cuffs. Just getting ready.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
What we got?
The Honourable
Okay.
Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, we take climate change and the fight against it very seriously.
Doppelganger out there for this lady. I know somebody that looks very, remarkably similar.
Our government has made the commitment to reach
Doesn't
net
look like a
zero
politician.
by 2050. And if the Bloc
Sleeveless.
Québécois cares so much about this topic,
It's Friday night
I'd like
somewhere.
to ask why the leader of the Bloc Québécois, when he was the Quebec Minister of the Environment, said without hesitation that the government of Quebec intended to go forward with developing the oil industry in Quebec. I'd like to get
That's
an
an
answer to that
interesting
question.
pattern on her dress as well.
The honourable
outfit.
the honourable member rather for Louis Saint Laurent.
Sleeveless. Imagine
Mr. Speaker,
sexy
after
Sean
8 years
Fraser,
of this liberal
sleeveless.
government, we
Gerard.
see that mismanaging public funds is really their brand. Journalist Danielle Leblanc from Radio-Canada tells us that the Sustainable Development Technologies Canada Fund has spent nearly $40 million in a sloppy manner, and this shouldn't surprise anyone.
Sloppy.
Because when the bosses are behaving like this, when the government mismanages everything, well, it makes sense that everyone underneath the bosses is going to do the same thing. When will this Liberal government finally show some common sense in how it manages public
He
funds?
got himself in trouble the other day. He had to
Honourable
apologize.
C'est le député Louis Saint-Laurent pour
All right.
sa-
He's rested. He's
I'd like to
back
thank the
from
member for
being
this question.
rehydrated, ready to go.
And we need to remind Canadians of the facts, Canadians who are watching today.
Go, Francois.
As soon as allegations were made, we asked for an arm's length expert report, and on the basis of that report, we took action. And we required that a plan be immediately implemented, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we have the highest level of governments in that fund. We expect the highest level of governments from all institutions managing public funds. The Honourable
He's
Member for
tired.
Louis Saint-Laurent.
Once you just rehydrate,
Mr. Speaker, it's very
takes a
interesting
while
to hear what
before
the minister
your
said.
juice
But
comes
the
back.
problem is that it's always the same thing with this government. Every time they're caught with their hand in the cookie jar, then they suddenly
Bourgeois.
do something. But actually, the alarm bells had been ringing for a long time, but the government didn't do anything. Now the government is saying we need accountability and serious management. Does this government believe in the current management of this fund who are responsible for the problems that we're talking about?
good job. He's intense today, man.
The Honourable
He
Minister.
was hot the other day. He was
Mr.
flipping
Speaker, there's no cookie jar in this situation. We're talking about serious allegations. It was the government that asked for the report. We were the ones who asked to ensure that we could actually have an inquiry into the allegations and then to create a system with the highest level of rigorous governance, Mr. Speaker. That's what Canadians expect from us. And that is what this government expects from all institutions managing federal funds. We will ensure that taxpayers' money is properly managed.
Not got a lot of
After 8 years
endurance.
of this NDP Liberal government, they've made it absolutely clear that they intend to censor what Canadians can see, hear, and post
Rachel
online.
Thomas.
They are hell-bent to make sure that this is the case. My colleagues and I brought forward a very common-sense motion today in committee asking that the minister come and answer questions with regards to her new podcast registry. This podcast registry, of course, is moving forward under the government's current censorship legislation. The response was this. The NDP, the Liberals, and their Bloc allies all voted down our motion. They don't want to hear. They don't want to ask questions. They don't want to understand. They don't want to give Canadians a voice. In fact, one might refer to them as the censorship coalition. Why is this government so hell-bent on censorship?
Kind of like the WWE, I find it is. Like not the stuff in the ring, but the rest of it, the show. It's funny. Here we go. Who we got?
Speaker, let's hear what
Oh my God, it's a bra and panties match.
What the CRTC published. Mr. Professor
Go for it, ladies.
calls the conservative
Coming out in
argument
their
a complete
bathrobe.
disconnect with reality. He says it's clear it was not intended to control what users see or post online.
read
He
English.
calls the CRTC process a mere formality. He said, as a teacher, if a student wrote this in an exam, I'd put a big 0 on his exam. You really don't have to be able to read to say something as pathetic as that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Who we got?
The
You're kind of slow,
member
Greg.
For Saint-Léonard
What
Saint-Michel.
do we got here? It's a colorful top. That's purple. I think the other lady was wearing
After
mauve.
years of inaction from the Conservatives,
Oh, no.
this government finally adopted a system to protect passengers' rights with a set of obligations that all
So
air
what's going on
transport
here
companies
is
must
she's
respect.
teeing up her own side.
In order to
so
strengthen
another
that
liberal's going to
system,
speak and
Further
tune up
measures
to
were
what
adopted
she's
in
saying,
Bill
make it sound really
C-47 to
good.
create stricter regulations.
So this is pushing some regulation.
Stricter regulations on air transport companies to
Air
ensure that
transport
passengers
companies,
will
okay.
always be protected. Can the minister tell
Not
us
my biggest
about this?
concern personally. Who can afford to travel?
Monsieur le Président, je remercie ma...
All
Mr.
right.
Speaker, I'd like to thank my friend and colleague for her question.
Most interesting man in the
Canadians work
world.
hard, they save and they put aside money for their holidays or to go visit loved ones. That's why our government was the first to protect passengers' rights. We strengthened our passengers' rights by making
See
compensation
that though?
mandatory
That
for
a
low
liberal asked a
situations.
liberal that
By ensuring that the responsibility
the
falls
worst part is
on the companies, not
they
passengers.
were both
and
reading
by
from sheets.
creating
So
standards
it's boring
that apply in case of disruption
and
to
they're
travel.
bad at
we
it.
were the
Like,
first
what
government
would you do
to
with
be
your
there
morning
and
if this
stand
is
up
all
for
you were
Canadian
doing all
passengers,
day?
And we will continue to do so.
Prepare, make it interesting.
Député de Colton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Week.
After 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, Liberal insiders have never had it so good, and Canadians are paying the price. We've learned that the RCMP is investigating allegations of misconduct involving 3 companies that worked on the ArriveCan app. They paint a picture of cozy relationships between this government and questionable contractors. Sweetheart deals for the Liberal insiders while Canadians struggle to make ends meet. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost. When will the Liberal government come clean on their unethical behavior and quit lining the pockets of Liberal insiders?
It's a good question. I'm concerned about that and their 15%, or pardon me, cutting the GST on
Mr. Speaker,
apartment
this is also
builders,
my first
rental
day
builders.
rising in the chamber with you and the chair,
Where
and
does
I
that
want to congratulate you sincerely on your appointment.
Yeah, I like this justice guy.
Mr.
Justice, he's all right.
Never acceptable.
Speaks well.
We're aware of the RCMP's ongoing investigation into these serious allegations. To protect the integrity of the investigation, we will not be providing any further comment at this time.
Well, that's kind of a cop-out, maybe.
Député de Mission
Boring
Metzky,
answer.
Fraser Canyon.
You just lost
Speaker,
points.
after 8
Nice
years,
tie.
This NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost. Statistics Canada reports the number of businesses closing shop in Canada is greater than the number of businesses opening. In August, there was a 37% increase in business insolvencies year over year. This is the highest it's been in recent history. Canadians are losing confidence at an alarming rate in their ability to do business in our country. So my question is this: Why has the government turned a blind eye to the looming crisis of declining entrepreneurship in our country?
Big business doesn't want entrepreneurship.
Mr. Speaker, I want the small business owners of Mission, Mascot, Fraser Canyon to know that their Conservative member of Parliament has voted against cutting taxes for growing small businesses, voted against lowering credit card transaction fees by up to a quarter, voted against supports for diverse and underrepresented entrepreneurs. Common sense does not mean voting against supports for small businesses, Mr. Speaker.
So many people reading from paper today. I apologize for that. Well, no, I don't apologize, but I'm sorry. It makes me sorry.
Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, that Liberal minister knows as well as I do that many of the problems facing small businesses in our country are a direct result of that party's governance and their negligence. Higher inflation, higher payroll taxes, higher carbon taxes, higher commercial rents, a labor crisis, more red tape, and a botched CEBA repayment plan that confused thousands of entrepreneurs across our country. All of these factors hurt our job creators and business confidence in our country. When will this government begin taking these problems seriously?
Going pretty slow today, man. Subscribe if you can. Check us out. We'll be here every day. We're doing this.
Mr.
All the
Speaker,
question
the
periods.
leader of the opposition called the supports we provided small businesses big fat government supports. He's literally mocking the idea that we stood up for small businesses in the time of their need. In the middle of the pandemic, small businesses were worried about keeping their doors open, keeping the lights on, and keeping their teams employed. Thanks to our government, we stepped in their darkest hour and delivered supports like the Canada Emergency Rent and Wage Subsidy, hardest hit business, tourism, hospitality recovery programs, and the CEBA loans. I am proud of the fact that we are there for them, Mr. Speaker. So while the leader of the opposition mocks the support we provided small businesses, we will continue to have their backs.
Oh, a little bit of fire at the end of that one. A little bit of fire. Not impressed so far. Not impressed with Richie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, every week Canadians are having to spend
Congratulations,
more and more on
some of you
just to
can
feed
read
their
from a
families.
book.
They are having to put off savings and even other essentials in order to keep putting food on the table. We recognize the global supply
So she's
chain
teeing one up for the
challenges
Liberals
and global
now.
inflation, but we need to acknowledge Canadian
This isn't one of my
families are having a
favorite
hard
parts,
time
but
right now.
look how
Will the
boring
Minister
this
of
is. She can make it
Innovation, Science and
exciting, being like
Industry
how
tell us
great
about
something
his
is,
meeting
and then
the grocery
toss it off to
executives
somebody else. They
and what
take
we
the
are doing
baton
to
and
address
keep running.
affordability at the grocery stores.
Talking about groceries, spent her whole morning writing that piece, typing it.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague and
get it
actually
going.
all our colleagues here on
Let's
this
have it
side because, you know, my voice was to express the frustration of millions of Canadians when I met the CEO of the grocery store. But the good news, Mr. Speaker, is today we presented a 5-point action plan. First of all, we have commitment from the grocery store. We're going to create the Office of the Consumer Affairs to help consumer, Mr. Speaker. We're going to make sure that the Grocery Code of Conduct is going forward. We're going to collect more data on the food prices in Canada. And, Mr. Speaker,
you're losing me,
fight
Francois.
for more competition. Every day is a good day to fight for Canadians. They should join us, Mr. Speaker,
Did he say
and make sure that we bring
they are gonna lower
stabilization and
grocery
price in
prices?
Canada for the benefit of all.
This guy. Come on. They're not answering the questions.
Mr. Speaker, this summer, 11 emergency rooms in Alberta closed due to the shortage of healthcare workers. And today, we learned that some Canadians are being forced to leave overcrowded emergency rooms without treatment due to no staff. The Liberals and the Conservatives
Bad news right there. That's a bad situation like that.
From
It's
Conservative
all
leaders
over.
like Danielle Smith, Scott Moe, who want U.S.-style healthcare that will poach nurses and doctors from our public system. When will the federal government stand up for Canada's public
bad you're not
healthcare and
at
ensure our
work.
hospitals have the staff they need to care for Canadians?
L'honorable ministre de la Santé.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And standing up for public health care is what we have done over the last 8 years. It's certainly what we're going to do going forward. We made an investment of $200 billion in our health system, and we're making sure that not only does that money flow, but that there are indicators so that Canadians can see how health outcomes are improving for them in every corner of this country. We're going to make sure that these dollars go to make sure that we reduce wait times, increase doctors, increase nurses, and make sure overall Canadians get better health.
L'honorable député de Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, on the 112th National Day of the Republic of China, Taiwan, I reflected on a few facts. Taiwan's never held 2 of our citizens as hostages for 1,019 days. It hasn't intimidated Chinese Canadians or interfered in our elections or tried to buy off MPs or political parties. Mr. Speaker, Taiwan is a democracy. They don't have a president for life who won't hesitate to destabilize world peace or threaten Canada's bilateral trade as a coward Liberal government looks on. Can the government enlighten this House if there's been any new credible evidence for it to stand up for Canadians and combat foreign interference by the Chinese Communist Party, or is its new strategy to engage in a diversionary war with India?
It's an issue. Diversionary war with India. It's a bad situation.
L'honorable ministre.
Here we go.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Right.
I would like to,
All
of course,
right.
reassure
Missed
all
a
members
button.
in this House
Melanie
that it's
Joly
important
missed a button.
for us to counter any form of foreign interference.
You can see it.
That is why the Minister of Public Safety and myself have been working on this over the past months. And of course, we all know that Justice Hug has been appointed to be in charge of the inquiry.
We've got to make it
that
fun.
being said, I must also say that we'll continue to work with within our Indo-Pacific strategy, and we have our China framework.
She did miss a button, though. See that? You can see it. So that's not just me. Like,
Cela nous amène à la fin de la
I'm just
période des
telling
questions
you that she missed a
orales.
button.
Cependant, collègues,
Whoever colleague.
oh, what do we got here? That's the end of that. So that's what we're doing, guys. We're watching question period, doing commentary, having some fun as we go, learning, listening, being in tune with the issues across Canada. Most people don't know how any of our systems work. We'll learn together, have some fun along the way. That's it. So subscribe, like, if you can. That would be appreciated. Yeah, question period. My name's Ehren. We're watching Canadian Clown Services. That graphic will be different tomorrow. Anyhow, guys, we're wrapping up for today, and it's been a lot of fun. We'll be back tomorrow. Check us out. So, yeah, we are going to wrap it up, guys. This is it. Really fun afternoon, a little bit lighter than yesterday. I can't lie, guys. I see that watching so much Canadian politics has actually changed my spirit in the last 6 months. Like, there are some things I'm glad that I know about, but man, there are some things that, sometimes it's just better to be a kid and naive and innocent. But anyways, that's the way it goes. I do hope that some of the people that I chatted with on here today will think about having a conversation. Like, we're friends already. It's not like we're going to be coming to blows online. It'd be a video call anyway. It would just be fun. And you can see, I met our friend Dustin the other day, who we did a little piece on during the show. Sorry about the audio, but he's a great guy. Like, just a good old Canadian boy that's worried about things for his, his family. And that is it. Anyhow, we are going to wrap it up. Thank you all for tuning in. A couple of people dropped in late. I hopefully caught you to at least say hello. Because that's part of it. Like, you come into the room, you're part of the group, someone says hello. Maybe everybody says hello. That's what we're going for. And of the people that want to be a part of the group that belong here, and we do have a bunch of different people, guys. We had the nation covered this morning, all the provinces, not all the territories, but I don't even know if they have internet up there. So we're not going to worry about that. I'm Ehren, Question Period Canada. It's great to see everybody today. There's so many people. And we will come up with some bonuses for the memberships. I don't know what we're going to do yet. It's a funny platform, YouTube, because, like, you can only be so real on here. Sometimes I think, like, oh, just try something else. But in the meantime, we will be back every day at this period of time in the day doing something about Canadian politics. Maybe it's going to be a downer, maybe it's an upper, maybe it's an in-between, maybe it's a mixed bag. It's probably going to be a mixed bag most of the time. We'll try to balance that out. It's tough for just me to get through the episodes of watching. If there's so many terrible things, it does weigh you down. It does me. I don't know how it affects you, but it affects me because I feel it. Like, I watched a lot of violence yesterday. Like, and again, I can watch a restricted movie. I'm not some, like, wuss, but when it's real, I don't like watching that stuff, man. Not in my country, and I don't care about the homicide or just I don't like seeing people behaving like that in the country where I live. Like, I don't like watching anybody on the planet that I live behaving like that, being treated like that. Those horses are dangerous, and it's dangerous for the horses too. Like, anyway, we'll go out on this, guys. Thank you all for watching. We are out. so calm. Everybody's really cool. Everybody's really cool, but I don't think they should be so comfortable this close to the road. I just don't want any of the girls to get hurt or any of these little fawns to get hurt.
Questions orales. Oral questions. The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Revealed in the tapes last week prove that the Prime Minister has not been telling the truth. The Prime Minister not only had the knowledge about the pressure being applied on the former Attorney General, but he and his office were in fact